Suchan left 2 tiger guards to cooperate with the Yamen officers in transporting Zhou Ming's belongings back to the inn. He and the others rode out of the city on horseback. Zhou Ming's corpse was buried 30 li outside the city in a mass graveyard. The mass grave was reserved for the deceased from impoverished families. Wealthier families would often hire geomancers to select proper burial sites. At this moment, a swift officer guided them, saying, "Gentlemen, Zhou's grave is over there." Suchan nodded and instructed, "Remove the shovels from the horses and start digging." The tiger guards took turns with their shovels, earth scattering around them. With a metallic thud, a shovel struck the coffin. The guards cleared the dirt away and pried it open. The coffin lid lifted, and a foul stench of decay surged out. It was the unmistakable odor of decomposing human tissue. The gases from decomposition had caused the body to bloat. At this stage, the skin would burst with a mere touch, spraying foul-smelling fluids everywhere. Suchan suppressed his nausea and said, "Uncover his body." Half an hour later, Suchan completed his examination of the corpse. He preliminarily concluded that there was no evidence of external trauma. The cause of death seemed confirmed. It was likely a supernatural killing, possibly by a 4th-rank sorcerer. Could such a sorcerer kill us just as easily? Someone whispered in concern. Back at the inn, Inspector Zhang furrowed his brow and muttered, "Something doesn't add up." He turned to the night watchers and demanded, "Did any of you notice anything unusual?" The night watchers shook their heads, clearly at a loss. "Wasn't Zhou Ming a night watcher agent?" Zhang pressed. "You have no secret codes or signals among you?" Zhang Lizong responded in frustration. "They might have taken or destroyed them already. All we have left are useless remnants. And it's been half a month since the murder. Are we left with no clues at all?" Zhang Xuanfu grew irritated. "A bunch of useless fools." He muttered to himself, "I'm just a censor by background, not an investigator. I have to rely on these night watchers, even though they're better at fighting than investigating." At this point, one of the silver gongs suggested, "Why not just send a sorcerer to interrogate Yang Xuanan?" Zhang Xuanfu snorted. "Terrible idea. Testimonies from sorcerers ranked 4th or higher aren't admissible evidence. I know Yang Xuanan is colluding with mountain bandits, but where's the proof? Without evidence, how do we convict him? How do you bring down a 2nd-rank commander?" Zhang Lizong shook his head. "Forget it, Governor. Stop putting them on the spot." Zhou Ming didn't leave behind any encoded messages. Zhang Xuanfu sighed. "Or maybe the killer destroyed the clues. Now we can only pin our hopes on Su Ningyan. If he could spot flaws in the tax silver case and uncover the old case involving the princess of Pingyang, perhaps he can solve this headless case involving Zhou Ming." At that moment, Suchan entered the room, followed by the night watchers and tiger guards. Zhang Xuanfu's eyes lit up. "How did the autopsy go?" Suchan replied. "The findings match those from the Yamen's initial autopsy. We won't get any more clues from the body." The governor nodded, disappointed but resigned. He then asked, "I heard you injured the Yamen's registrar?" Suchan responded calmly, "I was measured. I wouldn't kill him." "Did you find any leads among the belongings?" Zhang Lizong shook his head. "No encoded messages. Maybe they were destroyed." Zhang Xuanfu looked at Su and said, "It's all up to you now." He added, "Pay attention, everyone. Observe how he handles this case. If any of you can learn even a 10th of his skills, I'll personally groom you for promotion." Zhang Lizong had long wanted Suchan under his command, but Wei Gong wouldn't permit it. Thus, he resorted to this plan, having Suchan mentor his night watchers. Suchan pondered for a moment. "Are the night watchers' codes secure?" Zhang Lizong answered, "Silver gongs and above know them. Copper gongs involved in cases do as well." Suchan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then they're not secure enough. Zhou Ming likely didn't use the night watcher codes." A silver gong asked, surprised, "How can you be so sure?" Suchan responded calmly, "If the codes were highly classified, the killer couldn't have pinpointed the clue and destroyed it amidst all the belongings. The code should have been found by us, but it wasn't. If the codes were too accessible, Zhou Ming, an experienced investigator of 20 years, would never have relied on such a risky method. He would have known it could be compromised easily." Suchan concluded, "So the situation isn't complicated. The answer is simple. He hid the evidence using a different method." The room was filled with a collective realization. Of course, that makes sense. It seemed like we had no leads, but there's only one possibility. Zhou Ming hid the evidence somewhere else. But how do we find it? Someone asked. Suchan said, "Let's analyze from the beginning. If you were Zhou Ming, what would you do?" Another night watcher suggested, "I'd use the night watcher codes. We just established the codes aren't secure enough." Su reminded him, "Then I'd hide it where no one could find it." "Pointless." Someone retorted, "If no one can find it, what's the point?" Hearing this, Suchan snapped his fingers. He looked at the copper gong who had inadvertently given a hint. "Exactly. Zhou Ming hid the evidence to be found by us. It was meant for us." Su continued, "Follow this line of thinking. Think about what kind of clue he'd leave behind." Zhang Xuanfu's eyes brightened. "That's right. He wouldn't hide the evidence in an inaccessible place. The object with the clue wouldn't be valuable, but it would be noticeable." The night watchers exchanged puzzled looks. But we've already checked everything. There were no codes. We didn't find anything that matched with the jade pendant either. Suchan fell into deep thought. The clues are just too few. No clear direction. But investigating is about finding clues. A good detective must learn to consider every angle and extract clues from even the smallest details. Several minutes passed before a silver gong asked, "Any leads yet?" But before he could finish, Zhang Luzhong spoke sternly, "Don't interrupt him." Zhang Xuanfu raised a hand, signaling everyone to stay calm. He felt a wave of emotion stir within. Could Lord Wei have foreseen this situation? Did he send Suchan because he knew how tough this case would be? If that's true, Suchan is the perfect person to aid me. Lord Wei, your foresight is incredible, truly a master strategist. The fact that he sent Suchan means he has full confidence in his ability to solve this case. Filled with renewed hope, Zhang Xuanfu's earlier frustration melted away. His spirits lifted significantly. Meanwhile, Suchan was unaware of Zhang Xuanfu's inner musings, immersed in his own reasoning. Is there really a clue in these belongings? If I were Zhou Ming, and I wanted to leave a clue for the Night Watchers, would I leave it in my possessions? No, too easy to destroy. A single fire could turn everything to ashes, but I still need to leave something. The safest option would be redundancy. Not putting all my eggs in one basket. Of course, redundant plans. Yang Yining was Zhou Ming's second basket. She was a backup plan, not the main clue for the Night Watchers. If there's nothing in Zhou Ming's belongings, then why not approach this from Yang Yining's angle? She's on her way to Qinzhou, planning to meet the scholar Ziyang. And what would Ziyang do when presented with this case? He'd face the same problem I am, a frustrating lack of clues. In the absence of clear clues, the natural approach is to gather more information. And how do we gather information? Of course, by questioning the person who brought the jade pendant. Suchan suddenly stood up. I got it. I know now. Bring Yang Yining here. I have more questions for her. Zhang Xuanfu immediately gestured to a patrolman. Quick, go get her. Moments later, a copper gong escorted the elegant woman to them. Yang Yining bowed gracefully, my lords. Why have you summoned me? Suchan asked. When Zhou Ming gave you the pendant that night, did he say anything else? Yang Yining shook her head. Aside from what I've already told you, he gave no further instructions. Otherwise, I would certainly remember. Suchan tapped his teacup thoughtfully. No, there must have been something more. Otherwise, not even Ziyang would be able to figure things out. Zhou Ming was a seasoned investigator, highly intelligent. Maybe you didn't notice, but he probably left a hint. Suchan stared at her. Try to recount exactly. You don't need to be word for word. Just give me the general idea. Yang Yining focused hard, recollecting the events of that evening. That night, Lord Zhou came to visit, just as he usually did. He brought some pickled snacks and a small gift. During the meal, he rambled a bit about official matters and the bandits in Linzhou. But since I'm just a woman, I didn't care much for such topics, so he didn't go on for long. After that, we played word puzzles. When we finished eating and I attended to him, that's when he mentioned the matter and gave me the pendant. Suchan's eyes narrowed. Word puzzles? Or the puzzle? Yang Yining pondered. One of them was 10 mouths and 1 heart. Before Suchan could speak, Zhang Xuanfu jumped in. A private matter. Thu, si. Yang Yining nodded and continued. 1,000 miles lost one. 100 miles lost one. Zhang Xuanfu narrowed his eyes. The neck of Bolu Boalura. Yang Yining added. A single bite consumes the ox's tail. Without hesitation, Zhang Xuanfu blurted out the farewell word, Gaozi. The other night watchers looked at him with admiration. Wow, the inspector is amazing. Zhang Xuanfu, visibly pleased, was filled with pride. Once again, my wisdom shines. I can't let Suchan hog all the glory. Meanwhile, Suchan frowned slightly. He was annoyed that Zhang Xuanfu kept interrupting his thoughts. Knocking on the table, he said, Inspector, I have a riddle of my own. Zhang Xuanfu gestured for him to proceed, his confidence still high. Go ahead and ask. Suchan leaned closer and said quietly, the scholar's daughter marries another. Zhang Xuanfu's brow furrowed immediately, then it furrowed even deeper. Soon, his expression turned stiff. Finally, he sat there blankly, his mind completely vacant. Satisfied, Suchan nodded, turning his attention back to Yang Yining. Please continue. Yang Yining recalled the last 2 riddles. The first was flawless white jade. The second, sun and moon together in the sky. The answers were Huang, yellow, and Ming, bright. Suchan instructed his colleagues. Get some paper and a brush. Once the table was set, he wrote down the 5 words, Thu, Boa, Huang, Ming, and Gaozi. Zhang Luzhong studied the words repeatedly. What do these mean? They don't seem connected. Each word stands on its own. What was Zhou Ming trying to convey? Or were these riddles just casual fun? Suchan turned to Zhang Xuanfu, only to find him still lost in thought. It's clear these aren't riddles, Suchan thought to himself. Let the inspector dwell on his own concerns. If Zhou Ming intended this as a clue for Ziyang, it wouldn't be too cryptic. It must be something a first-time visitor to Yunzhou could easily notice. What is it? that even a newcomer would spot immediately? Think from another angle. What would a person arriving in Yunzhou for the first time need? As Suchan considered this, a sudden realization struck him. I've solved the puzzle. The people around him were all taken aback, finding it hard to believe. Everyone had been involved in the case. Everyone had participated in the discussions. Everyone had the same information and clues. So why was it only Suchan who figured it out? Was Suchan really that terrifyingly brilliant? Zhang Xuanfu, who had been caught up in the scholar's daughter marries another riddle, suddenly had an epiphany. He grasped Suchan's arm, beaming with excitement. You've solved it? Really? Suchan thought to himself. If I say I was just messing with you, I might not leave this room alive. Instead, he got up and walked out, declaring, I've made a major breakthrough. As all eyes followed him, he pulled a painting, the Watching the Fish picture, from his horse's saddlebag, and spread it out on the table. The riddle's answer lies in the Watching the Fish painting. The jade pendant alone wasn't enough to convey the message. Zhou Ming must have used the riddle to direct Yang Yining toward additional information. For security reasons, he disguised the information as a word game. He deceived everyone, even Yang Yining herself, but a wise man like Ziyang would easily see through it. After a bit of questioning, Song Tingfeng frowned and asked, why was the riddle's solution in the painting? Suchan replied, because the Watching the Fish painting is the most accessible object, something that Ziyang, upon arriving in Yunzhou for the first time, would naturally come across. Everyone suddenly understood. That makes sense. This map for fishing was already in the first battle, fresh off the boat. The first thing to get is a fishing map. Suchan lowered his head and looked at the map. Is my reasoning right or wrong? Let's all verify together. The 5 fonts provided by the riddle are Si, Bo, and Gao. Huang Ming and the others silently repeated those 5 words. While searching for corresponding names, Song Tingfeng suddenly pointed to a spot, saying, there's also a Huang Bo Street here. As for the words Gao and Huang, no corresponding locations were found, especially the character Huang, which is taboo in Taifan. It's not anywhere on the map. Suchan analyzed. The clues are likely in one of these 2 locations. Song Tingfeng asked, so the other 2 characters are? Suchan shook his head. He said, the other words may be to mislead us, just filler. For now, let's focus on these 2 places, and see if we find anything. Zhang Xuanfu immediately selected 6 watchmen to change into plain clothes and head to Huangbo Street to investigate. Suchan brought Zhu Guangxiao and Song Tingfeng, his 2 close friends, to explore Ximing Bridge. Huangbo Street wasn't too far or too near the post station, about 10 miles away. Ximing Bridge was over 20 miles. The 3 of them galloped down the wide streets. The buildings and homes along the way had a distinct southern style. Suchan began to worry. Even though customs differ from place to place, is the imperial court's control over Yunzhou too weak? In the capital, bright yellow fabric is strictly for the royal family, but in Yunzhou, you'd occasionally see commoners dressed in it. At this moment, Song Tingfeng grumbled. The climate here in Yunzhou is awful, damp and cold. I'd prefer the capital. Sure, it's colder in the capital, but not this chilling. When I was escorting merchants back today, I even saw passers-by shivering as they walked. Suchan ignored their complaints. Actually, in this era, the winters in the south are much better than in the north. Poor families could gather some straw in winter, and if they had a place to shield them from the wind and rain, they could make it through. It's different in the north. Many impoverished people who couldn't afford coal would silently pass away in the winter. After all, the windy north lacked central heating. Half an hour later, they arrived at their destination. The 3 of them thoroughly inspected the bridge. Finally, Suchan's gaze locked onto a protruding brick on the outside of the bridge. Using his fingers, bit by bit, he pulled out the brick, which was about the size of a slab. He reached into the hole and felt around for a moment. He pulled out a brocade pouch. Sure enough, it was this brocade pouch that had prevented the brick from fitting snugly. Song Tingfeng was overjoyed. He urged eagerly, there's something here. Hurry and open it to see what it is. Suchan opened the brocade pouch. Inside was a slip of paper. It read, MOE by Lu 12347412. Suchan stared at the note in silence. What do these 2 sets of numbers mean? Zhou Mingjin was a real genius. So ostentatious. Too bad he's already dead. Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao exchanged a glance. The former asked blankly, what does it mean? Suchan snapped, how should I know? Same watchman, but what a difference in skill. Look at him. He handled the case better than the 2 of you combined. Song Tingfeng defended himself indignantly. The case itself was outstanding, each with its own uniqueness. Otherwise, how could we do undercover missions? We watchmen from the Yamen just need to handle force matters. By then, the sky was nearing dusk. Suchan stowed the slip of paper and said helplessly, let's head back. At the post station, Zhang Xuanfu demanded, you found nothing? Did you even investigate properly? The constable who went to investigate replied glumly, that street was nearly empty during the day. After asking the residents on a neighboring street, we found out it's all dog-related business. It only happens at night. There's no one around at this time. Thinking to himself, he muttered, a street isn't too big or too small. How can we get anything out of barging in aimlessly? Asking everyone, do they recognize Commander Zhou Ming's experience in office? Zhang Xuanfu sighed deeply. He sat still for a moment, then got restless and started pacing around the hall. No clues on Huangbo Street. Now we'll have to wait for Su Ningyan's team. If they don't find anything either, the case will be back to square one. We must uncover something, otherwise this will become a true cold case. The constable near the door exclaimed with delight, they're back. Everyone turned in unison to look at the doorway. They saw Suchan returning with 2 colleagues. Zhang Xuanfu immediately asked, how was it? Suchan placed the slip of paper on the table. At once, a dozen hands shot out, all trying to snatch it. The room erupted in a flurry of grabbing, everyone clawing to see it. Unfolding the note, they frowned again. What does this say? Suchan concluded. All right, it seems it's not a watchman code. Zhang Xuanfu dashed over, grabbed the slip, and said, let me see. MO 100 Lu 12347 412. Zhang Xuanfu stood still for a long time, his mind flashing through every classic book he'd read, but he ruled out any references to the literary classics. This is just like Miss when getting married. It's a trick question. While Zhang Xuanfu was puzzling over it, he noticed Su Qian silently heading upstairs. Ningyan, what are you going to do? Su Qian, dragging his feet, replied from the staircase, going back to my room to meditate. Otherwise, I feel like I'll drop dead any minute now. I haven't slept for 12 days. Zhang Yuzhong's brow twitched sharply. He already knew Su Qian was trying to break through the spirit-refining realm. Back on the canal, Su Qian had asked a similar question. 12 days, and still no breakthrough. He even fought a battle midway. This suggested Su Qian's spiritual potential was immense. If he stepped into the spirit-refining realm, his soul would undergo a qualitative change. Zhang Yuzhong, when he had advanced to the spirit-refining realm, took 16 days. Other golden gongs weren't much different. Looking at this young man, 12 days clearly wasn't his limit. Who knew how long he could endure? Thinking of this, Zhang Yuzhong reminded him, don't fall asleep. Back in his room, Su Qian took off his shoes and sat cross-legged on the bed. He began to breathe and meditate, visualizing a giant. Just as he entered a state of calm, there was a knock at the door. He opened his eyes, slightly annoyed. What is it? Zhang Xuanfu's voice came from outside. How's your state tonight? Come join me for dinner. It's a meeting of Yunzhou officials. Su Qian felt much better. Dinner with the provincial governor. By now, Yunzhou's officialdom would surely know he was here. Since he couldn't sleep, staying in the post station was dull anyway. The banquet was held in a large riverside courtyard. There were 30 tiger guard escorts, 7 watchmen, and Zhang Xuanfu arrived 15 minutes late. This was both a show of authority and a way to give guests ample time to prepare. A hearty laugh came from the crowd as an official in a flowing robe approached. Lu Changxiu, provincial governor. Zhang Xuanfu smiled and cupped his hands. Inspector General. Su Qian's lips curved slightly. The Inspector General is like a provincial governor in the previous world. He had an elfin vibe about him. Could he be Song Tingfeng's long-lost father? If memory served, this Inspector General also had the surname Song. Su Qian carefully memorized the faces of the officials present. That's the magistrate of this area, and he's here too. Song Buzhengshi approached a middle-aged man with the bearing of a scholar officer. This is Commander Li, the military chief of Yunzhou. The surrounding chatter quickly quieted. All eyes turned to Zhang Xuanfu and Yang Chuanan. The 2 imperial officials sized each other up for a moment, then both burst into laughter. Governor Zhang, it's an honor. Commander, the honor is mine. Su Qian furrowed his brow. Why do I feel like the situation is precarious? For a moment, it seemed like things might escalate into a clash, or at least some sarcastic barbs traded back and forth. Drop the formalities, came a measured response, breaking the tension. The dinner is ready. Let's head to the courtyard, someone announced. In a single prefecture, the 3 highest-ranking offices were the Commander's Office, the Inspector General's Office, and the Special Investigations Office. The Special Investigations Office was under the Imperial Censorate's jurisdiction, making the head investigator appear especially servile before Zhang Xuanfu. In the rear courtyard, everyone took their seats. 2 interesting things happened at the main table. There were 10 places at the main table, and seating arrangements were strictly regulated. In officialdom, protocol dictated who sat where. Zhang Xuanfu waved Su Qian over. Ningyan, sit by my side. Everyone immediately looked at the young man, their discerning eyes noting that this constable was far from ordinary. The second incident involved Commander Yang Chuanan, who stopped an official from sitting down and pointed to the seat beside him. Friend is coming. The official, surprisingly, moved without complaint. The term friend clearly didn't refer to another high-ranking official, but an actual friend. Su Qian sat calmly, though he was intrigued. A friend, not an official title, but a personal connection. Regarding that riddle mentioned today, Su Qian said, Governor Zhang, the answer is actually very simple, but you're too proper. As the Imperial censor overseeing Yunzhou, Governor Zhang was known as a strict and upright official. Naturally, he was upright, but if he had been a scheming, indulgent bureaucrat, the answer would have been immediately apparent. Just as Suchan was about to speak further, he noticed from the corner of his eye a young female general entering the room in gleaming armor. She was tall, with perfect proportions, her high ponytail adding to her striking appearance. She was both beautiful and confident, a dazzling military. Suchan's eyes lit up, and he mused, so Yunzhou has such a stunning military woman? This outfit is even more captivating than a black nurse's uniform or flight attendant attire. Governor Zhang was curious. Who is this? Yang Chuanan introduced her. Ladies and gentlemen, you may have heard of the famed swallow heroine. This is Li Miaozhen, an exceptional general I hired. Over the past year, she has repeatedly distinguished herself in suppressing bandits. If merits were formally rewarded, I'd have to give up my position as commander to her. His words drew a wave of approval from the officials, who were full of praise for the female general. Suchan studied the impressive general and had a realization. Yang Chuanan's specially hired general. That means she isn't formally part of the court. She's not an official court officer. Number 2 is also active in Yunzhou, focused on eradicating bandits and navigating rugged terrain. He once said he wasn't part of the imperial court. I even praised him for his chivalrous and righteous nature. And this impressive young lady is called the swallow heroine. At this thought, Suchan nearly laughed aloud. The swallow heroine had stood by Yang Chuanan on the canal, supporting him with a close relationship. Could she actually be number 2? No rush, he thought, slowly finding a chance to probe the matter. In the chat group, he could now confirm that both number 5 and number 2 were women, and number 2 had quite the impressive look. The uniform temptation is quite appealing. I wonder how number 5's looks compare. From the side, Zhang Xuanfu coldly commented. This just goes to show that most officials in Yunzhou share the surname Song. Among them, the commander holds the greatest authority. But earlier, the one who greeted me was Song the Inspector General. Though it's customary for the Inspector General to appear at such occasions, if you think carefully, the first person he introduced me to was the Investigator General, not the commander. It's clear they don't get along. I noticed at the table that Yang Chuanan remained silent most of the time. Song the Inspector General acted more like the host. These details matter a great deal in the official world. They cannot be ignored. Ningyan, you should learn from this. Suchan mentally noted it down, but replied casually, why should a martial man like me bother with this? Zhang Xuanfu shook his head and continued, also, I now realize something else. Do you know why the Song family presented a pipa at the banquet? Anyone curious enough would ask, but he didn't answer. A subtle way of sending a message. It was both a gentle show of dominance and a hint to remove a certain person. Yunzhou will be stable again, just like a pipa stringing together a tune. As for who should be removed, it's already obvious. Suchan thought to himself, you officials, is this really necessary? Day in and day out, it's all scheming and maneuvering. Lord Wei was right. I'm not cut out for court politics. There's only so much energy in a day. Half of it goes to Fuxiang, and the rest is needed for cultivation. I have no time left for official games. Suchan, his expression pained, made Zhang Xuanfu laugh heartily. It immediately improved his mood. Suchan chuckled and said, Governor Zhang, why don't we try another riddle? Zhang Xuanfu instinctively wanted to refuse, but he felt his scholar's dignity was being challenged. He raised his brows and motioned for Suchan to go ahead. Suchan smiled slyly. A woman giving birth. Guess the 4-character phrase. Zhang Xuanfu's expression froze, gradually turning blank. His face slowly turned from confusion to quiet frustration. Finally, he let the curtain drop. Zhang Yuzhong and Suchan both laughed heartily. From inside the carriage came the governor's cold grunt. Meanwhile, Commander Yang Chuanan had just boarded another carriage. He had barely dropped the curtain when it was swept aside again, and up stepped the high ponytailed, spirited Li Miaozhen. Yang Chuanan frowned. Under everyone's watchful eyes, you're boarding my carriage. Aren't you worried about your reputation? Li Miaozhen casually replied. We in the martial world don't care about that. I'm here to ask you something. That governor seemed fairly polite. Maybe he's just going through the motions. Do you think it's worth spending a bit of silver to smooth things over? Yang Chuanan shook his head. Bribing an imperial censor is as good as courting death, but taking care of them through force? That's another story. Li Miaozhen rolled her eyes. What do you think of that governor? Yang Chuanan gave his assessment. Mediocre. Li Miaozhen continued. That's good. The more inept he is, the safer you are. Yang Chuanan shook his head again. Mediocre doesn't mean incompetent. The truly dangerous ones don't show their claws. It's possible he's quietly preparing to deal me a fatal blow. Also, keep an eye on that constable. Li Miaozhen. What did you notice? Yang Chuanan thought for a moment and said, his sword is different from the other watchmen's, but it's still a sword, not another weapon. As far as I know, the watchmen's swords come from the Bureau of Heavenly Weapons and are considered magical implements. There's only one explanation for his blade. It's a magical artifact. Li Miaozhen nodded. To wield a magical artifact, One must either have a special background or a close connection with the Bureau of Heavenly Weapons. Yang Chuanan added. His demeanor is also unusual. I've observed him carefully. Though he appears quiet and reserved when not speaking, his attitude toward Governor Zhang is indifferent. And the same goes for Commander Song. He didn't show much respect, which might be interpreted as a martial artist's pride. But to display such pride at the qi refining level, that's truly rare. As for Jiang Yuzhong, the fourth-ranked Golden Gong, there wasn't much else to say. He was already at that level. Back at the post station, it was time to keep working. Suchan, continuing his cultivation, wrote the 2 codes, left by Zhou Ming on some blank paper. In the end, he was still carrying the burden alone. This mode of advancing to the spirit-refining realm would have been incredibly popular in his original time. Shut-ins would keep grinding for days on end, until their hair fell out, leaving their girlfriends psychologically scarred. Oh wait, they didn't have girlfriends. Never mind then. Old Jiang once said that martial artists improve themselves step by step, eventually becoming beings as terrifying as gods and demons. Refining essence strengthens the body, allowing martial artists to fight with great intensity. Refining spirit hones the soul. The path to advancement was grueling and sleepless, but once a martial artist successfully advanced, their physical and mental stamina would allow them to work at high intensity for long periods. This step-by-step approach was shared across all major cultivation systems. Every level laid the foundation for the next. It was logical, giving an otherworldly, yet methodical, path to progress. Su Qian's thoughts returned to the case. The code wasn't from the Watchman's Bureau. It must have been Zhou Ming's invention. That was absurd. Who could figure it out? It would be like leaving behind a code reading. Wilted leaves, daisies in sand, petals scattering over an ocean bone. In all of 9 provinces, no one would be able to solve it. Today's mental grind was too intense. His brain was drained, but he couldn't sleep yet. If Fu Xiang were here, that'd be great. We could do something beneficial for both body and mind. But then, I might drop dead on his snowy white stomach. Just then, he suddenly felt his heart skip a beat, almost as if he were about to collapse. Su Qian quickly took a deep breath, then swiftly pulled out the Book of Earth fragment, ready to vent his frustration. Which idiot is still chatting away in the middle of the night? But when he calmed down and looked, he saw it was a message from number 2. Number 3, I have something I'd like to ask you. You can name a condition in exchange. Su Qian thought for a moment. Number 2, that's the military woman. I've been looking for a chance to probe her. He tapped his finger on the page and typed a reply. I'd like to hear your question first. Number 2 replied. The governor's party arrived in Yunzhou today. I'd like to know about Jiang Luzong, his intentions, his personality, and his weaknesses. Su Qian was taken aback. What's this about? Number 2 sees Jiang as a potential enemy? No, a real enemy. She's gathering intelligence to prepare for a confrontation. Not to mention, Jiang and I get along well. Even if we didn't, I'd never reveal his weaknesses, especially since I'm part of the governor's team. With that thought, he replied, sorry, I can't share any information about the governor's party. After responding, Su Qian's mind wandered. He started thinking about the bigger picture. Number 2 collecting intel on Jiang Luzong. That's clearly preparation for a potential conflict. Is this number 2's own initiative? Or does she have Yang Chuanan's support? If it's the latter, it means that if things blow up, Yang Chuanan might take drastic measures. At this point, number 4 chimed in. Number 2, Yang Chuanan is suspected of colluding with bandits to divert military supplies. That's tantamount to treason. Number 3 is a scholar. How could a scholar support wrongdoing? I've been taught to clearly distinguish right from wrong, to weigh minor details against bigger truths. Number 2 replied, I'm sorry, I was too hasty. I have no intention of harming the governor's party. Su Qian responded, but by asking that question, you've already prepared for a fight. Number 2, I know you're deeply prejudiced against the court, but you're letting emotions guide your actions. Whether Yang Chuanan is guilty or not can only be determined after investigation. Number 5 chimed in, you're right. I also think number 2 is too extreme. Based on what you've all said so far, the governor's party just arrived in Yunzhou. They haven't even started their investigation, and you're already planning a fight. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Number 5, you're the last one who should be saying that. Number 2 stayed silent, seemingly upset. After all, none of the members of the earthly society were supporting him. Even number 3, who was usually on good terms with him, was clearly against him. By this point, Su Qian was almost certain that the military woman was number 2. He recalled her handsome yet beautiful face, and let out a sigh. Then he typed out a message. Fine, I'll give you some information. Jiang Luzong is a 4th-rank Golden Gong, skilled in balancing interests. As for his personality, there's nothing distinctive, and thus no obvious weaknesses. The information Su Qian shared was superficial, nothing confidential. Among the Golden Gongs he knew, there were some with distinct traits, such as Nan Gongxi, with her graceful demeanor, or Yang Yin, with his avaricious face, or Zhang Kaitai, who was proud and radiant. Compared to them, Zhang Luzong's personality was more moderate, without any obvious flaws, which also meant he had no significant vulnerabilities. Number 2 replied, "Thank you. Don't worry. I won't act recklessly, nor will I harm the governor's party without cause. I have one more question. I'd like to ask about someone named Suchan." Number 3, "You once mentioned this person." Suchan immediately grew alert. "Even you want to investigate me? Are you planning to confront me now?" Silently observing, Number 1 suddenly spoke up. "I can provide you with all the information about him, but you'll need to offer something of equal value in return." This sudden betrayal left Suchan stunned. "Wait a minute. Did you get my permission to sell my information? Did I agree? And now you're just openly selling it? What should I do? How can I stop this?" Number 1 was known to observe silently, remaining mysterious. Although Suchan had narrowed down the general scope, it still included too many people, and among them, none were easy to deal with. Moreover, what grounds did Suchan have to stop them? How is it related to me as Number 3? Why should I have the right to interfere, unless I reveal my identity? But after praising the constable Suchan so highly before, being exposed like this would be humiliating. I'd be too embarrassed to show my face again. After thinking it over, Suchan decided to observe quietly, to see what Number 1 would say, and to gauge Number 2's response. If Number 2 only wanted to gather basic information, or if Number 1 only shared surface-level details, then he would let it slide. Number 2 asked, "What do you want in return?" Number 1 replied, "You can owe me." Number 2 smiled. "Sure, I'll assess the value of the information you provide." Number 1 began typing. Suchan, originally a fast runner for the Chang'an County Office, Fugua Prefecture in the capital region. No particular distinctions. Until 3 months ago, his uncle lost the tax silver while escorting it and was sentenced to death. The emperor's anger had not subsided, so the Su family's 3 generations were exiled to the frontier. But no one expected that, on the 3rd day after the tax silver case surfaced, the case would be solved, and Suchan would be cleared of all charges. A brash voice chimed in. Southland's little firecracker couldn't help but comment, "Quite lucky." But Number 1 immediately countered, "No, he was the one who solved the tax silver case. With nothing but the case files and while confined in prison, he cracked it, making even Huya and the Bureau of Heavenly Weapons, as well as the Watchmen, scratch their heads over it." The members of the Earthly Society simultaneously thought, "This guy's got talent." Number 2 suddenly realized, so that's why he was able to sit next to Governor Zhang. Why he could immediately unravel the secret behind the Peepa's technique. Even if this guy is a lecher, his skills in solving cases can't be denied. He's here because of Yang Chuanan, and because of the Watchmen's deaths in Yunzhou. With that in mind, Number 2 sent a message. "I understand now. Thank you for the explanation." Number 1 replied, "Do you think his abilities stop there?" Number 2's eyes widened. "What do you mean? Does this Constable Suchan have other notable achievements?" Number 1 continued, "Remember the Sangbo case that Number 3 kept bringing up recently? Do you know who the Watchman's lead officer on that case was? It was him too." Before the Sangbo case, Suchan participated in a raid on a corrupt official's home. Upset by his superiors mistreating the official's family, he struck down Ingluo the Scorpion on the spot. He was imprisoned and sentenced to execution by waist slicing. After hearing this, Numbers 4 and 5 were filled with admiration. Number 2's eyes lit up. Suddenly, she felt a deep respect for Constable Suchan. Though he worked for the court, it didn't diminish his merit. Number 1 continued, "Because of his exceptional investigative skills, after the Sangbo case occurred, the emperor ordered him to take over the investigation. He was allowed to redeem himself through this case. However, the Sangbo case reached a deadlock. If not for you, Number 2, finding the Baifu commander Zhou Qixiang, Suchan would not have escaped his original sentence. In other words, he owes you a debt of gratitude." At this point, Suchan felt he had no choice but to step in and say something. "Yes, but he doesn't know of your existence. He's only grateful to me." After saying that, Suchan felt deeply embarrassed. So shameless. Then Number 1 went on to describe Suchan's role in exposing the collusion between Wu Shunjiao and the Yunzhou bandits. Number 2's emotions became conflicted. This entire matter had been triggered by him. Number 1 continued, "In addition to that, Suchan is also skilled in alchemy, and he has close ties with the white-clothed of the Heavenly Monitoring Bureau. Before joining the Watchmen, he was imprisoned by the Ministry of Justice due to Zhou Shilong's revenge. However, with the intervention of the white-clothed of the Heavenly Monitoring Bureau and the Grand Confucians from Yunlu Academy, he was released unharmed." Upon hearing this, Number 2 recalled Suchan's unique saber, and her suspicion was confirmed. He indeed had ties with the white-clothed. Number 4 interjected, "Wait a moment. So the Grand Confucians from Yunlu Academy stepped in?" Suchan swallowed nervously. Number 4's insight was too sharp. He started to feel a growing sense of crisis that he might be unmasked. "It makes sense that Number 1 looked into me," he thought. "After all, during my time in the capital, because of the Sangbo case and the tax silver case, I became a topic of interest in the bureaucratic circles. Still, Number 1 only knows about me after I joined the Watchmen. With that in mind, Suchan decided to test the waters by sending a message. Zhou Shilang's revenge. If I'm not mistaken, the mastermind behind the tax silver case was Zhou Shilang. It's just that Suchan had remarkable luck. Zhou was ultimately purged for abducting the Zhang family's young woman. What Suchan wanted to test was whether Number 1 knew about his role in framing Zhou. To his disappointment, Number 1 didn't respond, seemingly accepting the idea that Suchan's luck was exceptional. Number 1 went on. As for why the Grand Confucians of Yunlu Academy helped him, there are 2 reasons. First, he wrote a poem for the Purple Sun Hermit Studio. Second, his cousin was a scholar at Yunlu Academy and had already passed the provincial examination. Number 4 perked up, feeling like they discovered a crucial point. Suchan's cousin was a Yunlu Academy scholar and had earned the rank of provincial graduate. Suchan had to take on the Sangbo case to redeem himself, and during that time, Number 3 was deeply invested in the case, going so far as to spend hundreds of taels of silver to have Number 2 escort Zhou Qixiang to the capital and hand him over to Yunlu Academy. What was Number 3's relationship with Suchan and with that cousin? When the Sangbo case erupted with sword energy, Number 3 quickly got first-hand information. During the ancestral rites, the watchmen were stationed at the Sangbo entrance to guard it. Yunlu Academy had placed informants within the watchman's office. If those informants were family members of Academy scholars, trust would naturally be guaranteed. I see. Number 3 is that cousin, Suchan's cousin. Number 4 couldn't help but want to laugh out loud. This means that when I go to the capital next spring, I won't have to search aimlessly. I can go directly to meet Number 3's cousin. Whether or not this revealed Number 3's identity, the members of the Earthly Society all conveniently overlooked the crucial detail that the cousin was a Yunlu Academy scholar. The collective silence on such an important piece of information actually made Suchan feel nervous. At this point, Number 2 asked, "Anything else?" After a moment of thought, Number 1 replied, "This person enjoys the trust and high regard of Wei Yuan." This brief sentence caused an uproar among the Earthly Society members. Wei Yuan's name was renowned throughout the Dafeng Empire, well known everywhere. Even across the 9 prefectures, his reputation carried weight. Though not a cultivator, Wei Yuan was practically a jack of all trades. Of course, talents in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting were just flourishes. What truly made the major factions of the 9 prefectures sit up and take notice was his unparalleled talent in military strategy. In the 13th year of the Yuanqing era, the veteran General Du Gu was stationed in the north. At that time, the 3 major Manchu tribes assembled an army of 60,000 and invaded the borderlands. Within half a month, they swept through 3,000 miles of territory, leaving behind a scorched earth and countless dead. The court, in urgency, mobilized forces to stop the Manchu aggression. Although the advance was eventually halted, the situation remained dire. At that time, the future prince of the north was just a newly appointed prince, and the Emperor Yuanqing, still diligent and wise, was at his wits' end. It was then that Wei Yuan stepped forward, volunteering for the task. He vowed in a military pledge that if he could not eliminate the Manchu threat within 3 months, he would take his own life. The young Emperor Yuanqing, bold and decisive, immediately appointed Wei Yuan as Vice Minister of War and Deputy Commander-in-Chief, giving him full authority over the military. Wei Yuan did not disappoint, achieving a decisive victory in just a month and a half, leaving only 5,000 remnants of the Manchu forces to retreat north. The bond between this ruler and minister is still fondly recounted today. Wei Yuan's accomplishments didn't stop there. His most famous achievement was the Shanhai campaign 19 years ago. At that time, the Prince of the North had already become a renowned master, but even he could only be a hunter in Wei Yuan's hands, driven to fight under his command. The overall commander of the 3 armies remained this great eunuch who shook the world. The Shanhai Pass, located at the border with the western regions, saw the Manchus invading from the north and southern tribes pushing up from the south. They clashed with the Dafeng Empire and the Buddhist coalition forces in a deadly struggle at Shanhai Pass. In half a year, 1 million lives were lost, making it one of the most. Once again, as Dafeng's deputy commander-in-chief, Wei Yuan demonstrated his unparalleled ability to command armies. Tanshi, sitting on the embroidered bed, murmured to herself, "I was so foolish. I still underestimated this Suchan." Number 4's thoughts were complex. If I'm not mistaken, the reason for Yunlu Academy's intervention, it's all about Number 3. Number 3 is very likely Suchan's cousin, and since Suchan himself is held in such high regard by Wei Yuan, in a few years' time, the capital might see the rise of a prominent family. Number 1 added, "His weakness is obvious. He's lustful. He frequently lingers in the capital's pleasure quarters, mingling with multiple courtesans." Number 2, "If you want to deal with him, you could consider using a honey trap." Suchan immediately protested. "That's not true. I'm not lustful. You're slandering me." Then, feeling slightly guilty, he thought to himself, I visit those places, not because I'm lustful, but because I want to fill my empty soul with dopamine. Number 1 is so hateful. Not only is he selling my information without permission, he's also tarnishing my reputation. However, something seemed off. This wasn't like number 1's usual behavior. He considered defending Suchan, but then thought, Suchan's habits have nothing to do with me as number 3. At that moment, Li Miaojin said, you don't need to test me. I haven't hidden my gender. Still, using a honey trap is an option. I happen to know a woman of exceptional beauty. As she spoke, Li Miaojin recalled Suchan's deep dark circles under his eyes. Number 1's words made it clear. He's likely a seasoned libertine, smart as he may be. There's a significant character flaw. No matter how clever, a man's lower half sometimes has more influence than his brain. Suchan snorted in disbelief. Number 1 clearly doesn't know me. I'm not a libertine. I'm just like most men. I enjoy beautiful women, but I don't indulge. Suddenly, number 4 mused aloud. Word has it that Suchan is deeply strategic, capable of great patience. A honey trap may not work on him. Li Miaojin asked, surprised. What do you mean? Number 4 elaborated. If what number 1 says, then Suchan clearly had remarkable abilities. Yet he was content to remain a runner for years. Only when the tax silver case threatened his own safety did he take decisive action. Afterward, he joined the Night Watchers, solved numerous cases, and earned merits. A sharp contrast to his earlier behavior as a runner. He was likely waiting for this opportunity all along. Joining the Night Watchers was his stage to realize his grand ambitions and soar. Suchan was momentarily stunned. Is that what I was thinking? Am I such a scheming person? Why didn't I realize it myself? Number 4 had an international level understanding. The members of the Heaven and Earth Society, upon seeing this, actually agreed with number 4's analysis. After a long silence, number 6 suddenly chimed in. Suchan is a good man. I hope nothing happens to him in Yunzhou. Number 2, please don't harm him. And don't let the Yunzhou commander harm him either. Li Miaojin, puzzled, wrote back. How do you know him? Number 6 replied, I met him during the Sangbo case. After he learned about the Temple of Life, he borrowed more than 40 taels of silver from me, and promised to provide 3 coins of silver a day to the temple. Before leaving the capital, he even sent me 20 taels of silver. At this moment, everyone in the group couldn't help but marvel. Human nature is so complex. Such a man turns out to be a libertine. Li Miaojin sighed deeply. I understand now. I'll do my best to ensure his safety. At this moment, number 5 wrote, Hey, number 3. About that deal to deliver the Great Phoenix Princess and the Grandmaster, is it still valid? Suchan, surrounded by question marks, stared blankly at the message for a long time. Wait, that's obviously not valid anymore. Can't you tell it was just bragging? Suchan thought for a moment, then replied, I'll do it when I become a first-rank powerhouse. Number 5 snorted indignantly. I knew you were bluffing. My big brother's been pestering me all day, trying to gather information about the Great Phoenix Princess, and asking whether the princess and the Grandmaster are beautiful. Suchan replied, there are 4 great Princess Weiqing and the second princess are the top beauties in linen. As for the Grandmaster, I'm not sure. I've heard of her name but never met her. The reason Suchan said this was that he believed that a scholar from Yunlu Academy would not have the chance to meet the Grandmaster Luo Yuheng. At that moment, number 4 remarked, the Grandmaster is naturally stunning. I think she surpasses both princesses. Any man who sees the Grandmaster will be captivated by her beauty. Number 5, half understanding, nodded. Your Great Phoenix Grandmaster is a fox spirit? Number 4 immediately sent a stern message. Rubbish. Although this statement has some reasoning, it's not because she's a fox spirit. It's related to the secrets of the human sect. I can't say more about this. Li Miaojin gave a girlish snort. What's there to hide? The human sect. The human sect, as the name suggests, this sect's cultivation is deeply tied to human worldly energy. At a certain level of cultivation, they'll be entangled by the 7 emotions and 6 desires. That's why Luo Yuheng unconsciously stirs men's desires. The previous human sect Dao Keeper had a chance to reach first rank. He moved Lingbao Temple to the capital, hoping to find worldly connection and achieve first rank, but he insisted on remaining chaste. So he failed to transcend and passed away. When it came to his daughter, Luo Yuheng, Emperor Yuanjing was obsessed with cultivation, and there was no one else. With dual cultivation with Emperor Yuanjing, she could easily reach first rank. Suchan commented, but I recall Golden Lotus Daoist saying that Luo Yuheng never dual cultivated with Emperor Yuanjing. Suchan wished he could ping Golden Lotus Daoist just to confirm that Luo Yuheng was still completely pure, but perhaps Golden Lotus Daoist was out catching mice this late at night. Without any response from Golden Lotus Daoist, number 4 unexpectedly jumped in to clarify. The Grandmaster indeed never dual cultivated with Emperor Yuanjing. Marriage is another matter. Suchian's brows furrowed. Number 4 used to be an official, so his connection with the Grandmaster makes this knowledge unsurprising. But how does number 2 know so clearly? This clearly points to number 2's identity. Even if I ask, it's a sensitive topic among the members of the Heaven and Earth Society. Number 2 may not answer. Even if answered, it might come at an equivalent exchange. Currently, I'm in Yunzhou. I'll surely cross paths with number 2. Over Yang Chuanan's case, I'll just use that opportunity to subtly probe. No need to pay extra for now. After some thought, Suchian reasoned. With his cunning and talent, although new to Yunzhou, he's likely already gathered a lot. Number 2. If you're planning to seduce him, you'd better act fast. Suchian explained that this was just a friendly reminder for a friend, not that he himself had any fondness for beauty. However, Li Miaozhen did not reply to him. Soon after, the Dishu chat group fell silent. No one sent any more messages. The next morning, Inspector Zhang, along with Jiang Luzhong and the other night watchers, left the post house to explore Yunzhou's local conditions. Song Buzhang sure led the accompanying team. Noticing Su Qian's unmistakable dark circles and the fatigue in his eyes, Inspector Zhang, understanding his plight, allowed him to stay at the post house and rest well, but he reminded him not to forget about cracking the clues left by Zhou Ming. Although being treated like a tool annoyed Su Qian, staying at the post house suited him just fine. When someone's utterly exhausted, they hate going out. Why haven't I reached my mental limit yet? I just want to sleep. While eating breakfast, Song Tingfeng descended the stairs with a yawn. Ming Yin, I have a bold idea. Su Qian immediately interrupted. Put away those bold ideas. Because His Excellency has a strict set of laws here, he added. Song Tingfeng sighed, saying, that's so boring. He continued, it's been half a month since we had any fun with women. Su Qian sighed as well, responding, that's you. For me, it's been 18 days since I was with a woman. Honestly, I'm feeling a bit hungry, he admitted. Song Tingfeng picked up a bun and handed it over. If you're hungry, eat more, he said. Su Qian ignored him and commented, old Song, you're still not very sharp. At that moment, Song Tingfeng turned towards Zhu Guangxiao and said, later, let's call for some ladies. But Su Qian coldly interrupted, enough. Stop acting like a nagging wife with all these silly ideas. We can stroll around the city, but you can't go to brothels. Rules are rules. After finishing breakfast, the three of them changed into casual clothes and left. At a tea house along the street, a woman in unassuming attire was standing on the second-floor balcony. Li Miaozhen looked out the window and pointed at the three leisurely strolling men. Do you see them? That guy over there looks completely drained by women and alcohol, she remarked. Your task is to seduce him, the beautiful woman beside her asked in confusion. And after I seduce him? Li Miaozhen spoke firmly. Get close to him. Keep an eye on his every move. Subtly probe for information on his findings. But don't be too lenient with your efforts. His body might be severely weakened. He probably can't handle your advances. The woman chuckled and said, understood, master. I'll go now. As for whether her true identity would be exposed, neither of them was worried. Brash warriors lack the ability to sense the supernatural, Li Miaozhen noted. Back at the mountain stronghold, you managed to seduce Zhou Qixiang, a martial artist specializing in spiritual refinement, without being detected. As long as you don't reveal hostile intentions, he won't react with his refined spiritual defenses. There's no way she'll be exposed. Song Tingfeng looked around and remarked, this is still Yunzhou, but Beidasheng is different from other places. Look at this scene, filled with prosperity and splendor. You'd almost believe Yunzhou is a land of peace and celebration. But clearly, along our journey, we passed through numerous districts and saw large swaths of abandoned farmland and desolate, uninhabited villages. Even the normally quiet Zhu Guangxiao uncharacteristically spoke up at length. There's such fertile land here, plenty for farming. There are abundant resources in the mountains and salt fields on the nearby coast. So why has it come to this? Song Tingfeng declared. This time in Yunzhou, our mission is to purge Chengku. Once we're done and have eliminated the commander colluding with bandits, the bandit problem in Yunzhou will improve greatly. Ningyan is right. We can't get distracted by brothels. A real man should strive to serve the country and its people. He was passionately making his speech when he suddenly stopped. Holy crap! A stunning beauty had appeared ahead, and both Su Qian and Zhu Guangxiao immediately turned their gazes toward her, their eyes lighting up. On the street corner, a woman of unparalleled beauty stood with a soft smile. She was dressed in an elegant, luxurious gown. Her hair was styled in the latest fashion. A silk sash adorned with amethyst gems hugged her slender waist. Su Qian was practically drooling, an oval face with big eyes. Just my type, he thought. If only she had a bit of a fox-like charm too, that would be perfect. He reminisced about the most beautiful oval-faced women he had seen. Su Lingyue, the elegant and youthful JK beauty. Huai Qing, the cold, noble, and commanding woman. Li Miaozhen, the heroic and determined warrior woman. But this chance encounter was different. This woman had a seductive, fox-like charm, radiating sensual allure. She was the goddess of his dreams. Su Qian's heart fluttered, and he thought, this is the perfect woman I've always dreamed of. Finally, In this lonely world, I've found her. I've found love, he thought. Among the vast seas of beauty, I only need one. Su Lingyue, Huiqing, Linen, the national teacher, all of them were fleeting illusions. However, Su Qian suddenly realized something was off. No matter how beautiful the woman in the distance was, she shouldn't be able to surpass those other stunning beauties so easily. His instincts quickly detected this illogical situation. He keenly picked up on the anomaly. This brought Su Qian back to his senses a bit. He subtly brushed his thumb against the jade ring that Ziyang Junshi had given him. A warm current flowed from the ring, calming and rejuvenating his mind. When he looked at the so-called stunning beauty again, Su Qian's pupils contracted. What he saw was no longer a gorgeous woman, but rather a finely crafted puppet. Her face was pale as a ghost, eerily lifeless. Her vacant eyes were unsettlingly silent. Kai Wei had once said that ghosts lingering in the mortal world either benefited from special geomantic conditions, like the ghost girl trapped at the or were remnants of powerful beings who hadn't fully perished. However, even in those cases, their existence was time-limited. This ghost, it seemed, was being controlled by someone. There was a ghost master behind her. This ghost is quite powerful. Even I was nearly deceived. If not for the Confucian spirit of righteousness repelling evil, I might have fallen into her trap. Su Qian discreetly shifted his gaze back. Only then did he notice that his two companions were in trouble. Their eyes were slightly dazed, staring longingly at the ghost. Su Qian felt a little embarrassed. Was I just like this moments ago? Song Tingfeng was completely captivated by her beauty, while Zhu Guangxiao seemed entranced by thoughts of romance. He was probably thinking, I'm ready to settle down and start a family. I've even thought of a name for my future son. Su Qian silently thought to himself, that's not love. That's just lust over a body that doesn't even exist. He noticed Zhu Guangxiao's conflicted expression, as if he were torn between his childhood sweetheart and a new infatuation. At that moment, the stunning woman swayed her waist enticingly as she approached. The woman approached slowly and gracefully. Are the three gentlemen out for a stroll as well? I'm all alone, and it's quite dull. Would you mind if I joined you on your walk? Su Qian immediately grew. As expected, she's targeting us, he thought. With that realization, he intentionally frowned, pretending to hesitate. We were just on our way to a brothel. That might not be appropriate for you, he added. Unexpectedly, Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao took a few steps back. Who's going to the brothel? They asked. If you want to go on your own. I, Song, am not that kind of person. Internally, they scoffed. That Su guy really is shameless. Talking about brothels so openly in broad daylight? Fine by me, the woman thought. I'm good at dealing with shameless men. Su Qian's eyes glinted briefly. With the protective power of Zi Yang's jade ring, I'm not afraid of her tricks. If she tries anything suspicious, I'll ambush her immediately. I have the element of surprise. The odds are in my favor, though it's best to leave her alive. I can interrogate her later tonight. With that plan in mind, he put on a reluctant expression and said, well, since that's the case, let's walk together, then. He decided to observe her closely. If I recall correctly, there's a Taoist technique for dealing with ghosts. In the spellbook gifted by the great scholars, she might think she's manipulating me, but in reality, I'm the one leading her. Meanwhile, on the upper floor of a nearby tea house, Li Miaozhen stood by the window, watching the scene unfold below. Zhang Yuzhong went with Zhang Xuanfu to inspect the local conditions. But without the presence of the Sword of Heaven's white-robed guard, the golden jade seal isn't coming back. And with Zhang Yuzhong absent from the relay station, there's no longer any magical detection. The spirit master won't be discovered. She may be skilled in seduction and illusions, but she has no physical form. She can't truly engage with a man if she wants to maintain a long-term connection with Su Qian without being exposed. I'll have to visit a brothel and hire a woman. Then, after this task is done, I'll give her some tonics to boost vitality. Otherwise, ending up in this state at such a young age, if she doesn't take care of herself, she'll be doomed. The four of them wandered through Beidasheng, exploring the local customs and culture. They sampled various delicious foods. The woman introduced herself as Su Su. She claimed to be from a wealthy merchant family. Her father was a silk trader, which explained her luxurious attire. She wore beautiful. Seeing you three gentlemen, handsome and distinguished, I couldn't help but feel admiration. I just wanted to get to know you better. Su Qian inwardly mocked her words. Get to know us? Or something else entirely? Make that clear, will you? What's more annoying is that Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao actually believed her nonsense. Not that I can blame them. They've been demoted recently. Song Tingfeng eagerly pushed some pastries towards Su Su. Miss Su Su, why aren't you eating? He asked warmly. But Su Su continuously declined his offers. Su Qian picked up his teacup and chuckled. Miss Su Su, you came to a tea house and aren't drinking tea? Are you looking down on us? Su Su immediately feigned a hurt expression. Why would you say that, sir? Zhu Guangxiao and Song Tingfeng quickly scolded Su Qian. Su, if she doesn't want to drink, don't force her. Have some respect. Su Qian felt a surge of irritation. Damn it. You two don't even know your own names anymore, huh? Your lower heads have completely taken over your upper ones. Married men, and you're acting like this? Seriously. At that moment, Susu smiled subtly and casually asked, "Judging by your accents, you gentlemen aren't locals of Yunzhou, are you?" Song Tingfeng proudly raised his chin. "We're from the capital." Susu covered her mouth in surprise, gasping softly. Her expression was a mix of awe and reverence. "Capital gentleman. Truly impressive. I've always heard that the capital is the greatest city in the world, a place of talented people and extraordinary sights. I've long dreamed of visiting." Suchan had to admit that when it came to captivating men, this mysterious, ghostly woman was the best he'd ever seen. Even Fu Xiang was slightly inferior to her. Zhu Guangxiao proudly added, "We're night watchmen. Have you ever heard of us, Miss Susu?" Susu playfully shook her delicate hands and blinked her innocent, clear eyes. "What brings you esteemed gentlemen?" "Oh no, I mean, esteemed officials, to Yunzhou with the governor?" Song Tingfeng responded boastfully. "Naturally, we're here to investigate a case." Susu's eyes gleamed briefly. "What case are you investigating?" she asked. Song Tingfeng was about to speak when Su Qian delivered a sharp kick under the table. Song Tingfeng immediately came to his senses. Looking flustered, he said, "Miss Susu, this involves state secrets. We can't divulge any details." Susu smiled charmingly and said, "My apologies, I overstepped." She was quick to admit her mistake, displaying neither shyness nor pretense. This only made Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao even more infatuated with her. Meanwhile, Susu thought to herself, "These three have surprisingly strong willpower. I'll have to intensify my efforts. If I don't gather some useful information today, my master will be furious. And if my master gets angry, he won't let me have any men to toy with." That's Su Qian, though. His will is the strongest. Even though he occasionally sneaks glances at my body, his mind remains the most clear-headed. My master ordered me to seduce him. The other two are just distractions. At that moment, Su Qian stood up. "I'm going to the restroom," he said casually. "Tingfeng, Guangxiao, keep Miss Susu company." The door to the private room opened and shut quickly. Susu subtly exhaled a puff of illusory charm, sending it toward the two men. Their eyes instantly became vacant, their expressions puppet-like. In a daze, Song Tingfeng thought he saw Zhu Guangxiao leave as well. The private room was now empty except for Song Tingfeng and Susu. At this moment, Susu gracefully stood up and unexpectedly began removing her silk dress. Song Tingfeng immediately reacted. He covered his eyes in a panic. "Miss Susu, please stop. I'm not that kind of man." Meanwhile, a similar illusion played out in Zhu Guangxiao's mind. But unlike Song Tingfeng, he wasn't as hypocritical. As a practical, no-nonsense man, he led Susu to sit down on the table. Outside the room, Su Qian seized the opportunity to light a talisman. He tossed the burning paper into a wine jug. Moments later, cracks appeared on the ceramic surface of the jug. This was a Taoist wind bell talisman, designed specifically to activate the talisman, a physical container was required. A jar or vessel with the mouth of the container had to face the evil spirit, triggering the talisman upon contact. Su Qian held the jug firmly, then quietly tiptoed back to the room. However, just as he reached the door, he heard two heavy breaths inside. This caused Su Qian to momentarily freeze. His mind conjured some unpleasant scenarios. "I've underestimated this ghost," he thought. Inside, Su seemed to hear the sound of footsteps. "Is that you, Master Su?" she called out. "Both gentlemen here suddenly seem ill. Come quickly and take a look." Remaining alert, Su Qian pushed the door open swiftly. "What happened?" he asked. But the moment he finished speaking, he froze in place, stunned. Inside the room, Song Tingfeng was hugging a pillar, violently ramming into it as if possessed. Meanwhile, Zhu Guangxiao had both hands on the table, straining his waist muscles. Su Qian was utterly dumbfounded. What the hell is going on here? At that moment, Su, who had been hiding by the door, seized the opportunity to blow a charm mist at him. Su Qian instinctively moved to dodge, but recalling his plan, he decided to play along. Pretending that his pupils were dilating in a trance, Su Qian pretended to be under the illusion. At that moment, the door slowly and quietly closed by itself. A soft, playful laugh echoed in Su Qian's ears. Hee. A man sat on the table with one leg crossed over the other, transforming from a seductive beauty into an authoritative, cold queen-like figure. "Listen carefully, I have questions." Su Qian's eyes remained unfocused as he obediently nodded, appearing like a mindless puppet. Su pondered for a moment. "Is your investigation related to Zhou Ming and the night watchman?" Su Qian nodded in response, playing along. Su continued her questioning. "Tell me everything you know about the case." However, the man before her, despite his dazed appearance, unexpectedly said something that shocked her. "In your dreams," Su Qian replied. Su froze, stunned by his response. She then watched as Su Qian calmly pulled out a wine jug. He removed the lid and aimed the opening at her. As Su Qian uttered the command seal, Su finally realized something was wrong. But before she could react, a powerful force enveloped her, pulling her spirit into the jug. Su Qian quickly sealed the lid shut. His eyes flickered briefly before he returned to his usual demeanor. "Humph. Women," he muttered. Suddenly, He remembered something and glanced around the room. There, Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao were still caught in their illusions. They were moving frantically, their faces filled with bliss as they lost themselves in fantasy. Suchan was speechless. This illusion magic is something else. It hasn't worn off yet. He sighed, wishing he had a phone with him. If I could record this, it would haunt them for life. He decided not to disturb their pleasant dreams. Instead, he tore a talisman inscribed with a spiritual tracking spell. He moved to the window and began scanning the street below. He was searching for any suspicious individuals. However, all he saw was a vast expanse of white energy. According to spiritual readings, white energy represented ordinary civilians. Suchan exhaled deeply. He returned to the table, poured himself some tea, and decided to wait for the illusion to wear off. About 10 minutes later, Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao suddenly froze in place, as if time had stopped. After a few seconds, they both collapsed to the ground with a contented sigh. Suchan looked at their unconscious forms, his mind sparking with a bold idea. He carried Song Tingfeng to the next room. As he did, Song Tingfeng slowly opened his tired eyes. Mingyan, Susu, where is Miss Susu? He mumbled. Suchan feigned confusion, replying, she left. I came back from the restroom and saw her walking out. Her face was flushed red, and she was limping a bit. I tried to stop her, but she left in a hurry. I even called out, but she didn't turn back. Suddenly, Song Tingfeng sprang up and shouted, I have to find her. I want to marry her. But as he tried to move, he stumbled, feeling dizzy. Damn it, I feel so weak. Suningen, you must help me catch her. She's my future wife. Suchan chuckled silently to himself. Future wife? Are you talking about the pillar in the next room? Clearing his throat, he asked, what exactly happened to you? Song Tingfeng hesitated, embarrassed. Despite being a known flirt, deep down, he was still conservative and reserved. He found it difficult to explain. Such an absurd situation happening at a tea house in broad daylight. Suchan reassured him. Don't worry. Just sit and rest. I'll go outside and see if I can find her. I'll bring her back for you. With that, he left the room and headed next door. There, Zhu Guangxiao was just waking up. The same scene from the other room played out again. Zhu Guangxiao looked around in confusion and asked, where's Miss Susu? Suchan pointed toward the door, replying, she just left. I even ran into her downstairs, but no matter what I said, she insisted on leaving. I have to ask, did you upset her? Zhu Guangxiao's expression turned strange. Did you notice anything strange when she left? Zhu Guangxiao asked. Suchan pretended to think for a moment. Her face was red, and she was sweating. She was limping as she walked. Maybe she sprained her ankle? Zhu Guangxiao froze upon hearing this. Limping? He repeated. He suddenly lunged towards Suchan. Ningyan, I messed up. He cried. I can't face anyone back in the capital, especially not my fiancé. Suchan quickly comforted him. What happened? Take a deep breath and tell me. Zhu Guangxiao's face was pale with regret. I don't even know what happened. I lost control. I did something terrible to Miss Susu, something beastly. I already have a fiancé, a pure, innocent girl. What am I supposed to do now? Suchan nodded. You should think carefully about this. Zhu Guangxiao looked up. You don't seem surprised at all. Internally, Suchan was barely holding in his laughter. Of course I'm not surprised. Old Song from next door had the same reaction as you. He sighed. What's done is done. What can you do now? Maybe Susu was just a fleeting encounter in your life. Hearing this, Zhu Guangxiao looked utterly dejected. Watching Zhu Guangxiao's despondent expression, Suchan quickly covered his mouth to stop himself from laughing out loud. He nearly burst out laughing. Telling them that Susu was actually a ghost would probably just embarrass them a little. They might feel humiliated and curse a bit, but that would be it. They'd move on and laugh about it someday. But this was different. The more they regretted their actions now, the more they spoke of their shame and remorse. The more humiliating it would be once they learned the truth. They'd be so embarrassed they'd want to roll on the ground. This was the kind of mental torment Suchan loved. It was inspired by moments in his own life, like when he bragged in group chats with his uncles and feared exposure. In those moments of fear and embarrassment, he came up with this idea. If I ever get exposed and lose face completely, I'll just think about Song and Zhu's situation, and I'll feel much better. With renewed enthusiasm, Suchan patted Zhu Guangxiao's shoulder, leaving him in a dazed, confused state. Suchan suddenly blurted out, this is what brotherhood is all about. After leaving the tea house, Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao were unusually silent. Song was lamenting inwardly. He had finally entertained thoughts of settling down and starting a family, only for it to turn out to be a fleeting romance. His heart was filled with melancholy. Zhu Guangxiao was even more brooding. He was tormented by the fact that he had to choose between his childhood sweetheart and the beauty who had suddenly appeared in his life. When they returned to the station, both Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao decided to go take a walk to clear their minds. Song Tingfeng soaked in cold water, slowly regaining his composure. As he stared at his undergarments, something felt off. Why is everything still inside my pants? Meanwhile, Zhu Guangxiao was still wrestling with his dilemma. Miss Su Su is as beautiful as a goddess, he thought, but I already have a fiancé. Elsewhere, Su Qian sat near the shore, using his finger to activate a talisman, scraping off part of a charm. In an instant, a gust of eerie wind surged from the mouth of the jar. The temperature in the room dropped sharply. A figure, Xian, transformed into a stunning beauty, floating above the jar. With tears in her eyes, she gazed pitifully at Su Qian. What have I done wrong, sir? Why are you treating me this way? Su Qian tilted his head slightly, examining the ghost from below. I've heard you look like a projection from my third brother, he said. The ghost shyly pressed down her skirt, her flirtatious face, showing a tantalizing expression as if she had something to say but hesitated. Sir, are you peeking under my skirt? Su Qian calmly removed the jade ring he was wearing. He placed it on the ground. You think you can seduce me? By the way, he added, this jade ring is like a blessing for homebodies like me. The ghost scrutinized the ring cautiously. After confirming that it emitted Confucian energy, Su Qian nodded. The ghost dropped her act immediately. Hovering above him, she glared down. Do as you wish. Kill me or imprison me. Su Qian chuckled. All right then, I'll just throw this ring into the jar. Wait, please. Su Su quickly relented. Let's talk this through. Su Qian shook the jade ring in his hand, smiling brightly as he asked, so, you're wise enough to cooperate? Now tell me, who sent you? Su Su put on a sheepish, ingratiating expression. My master is named Li Miaozhen. She's the saintess of the heavenly sect of Taoism. She's 19 years old this year and unmarried. It was on her orders that I was sent to seduce you and extract information about the Zhouming case to assess whether it poses a threat to Commander Shen Yangchuan in the southern region. Su Qian's eyes narrowed slightly. As I thought, this ghost was sent by number 2. At first, I only had suspicions when we met, but after you inquired about the Zhouming case, I was almost certain you were one of number 2's people. Number 2 is quite efficient, he thought. She mentioned the plan to use seduction just last night, and today it's already in motion. As expected of Master Lady, Su Qian's thoughts continued. So this ghost is one of the little sisters. Wait, is little sister a euphemism for a ghost? And number 2 is the saintess of the heavenly sect? Well, that does make sense. Among the various sects, those skilled in nurturing and controlling ghosts, besides the witch god cult, are usually found in the Taoist sections. I still held onto a sliver of hope that maybe this ghost came from the witch god cult, but reality rarely aligns with one's expectations. Also, number 2's ghost handling skills are lacking. This isn't nurturing a ghost, it's raising a traitor. I didn't even need to interrogate her harshly, and she spilled everything. Su Qian mockingly said, You're quite loyal, aren't you? Su Su smiled sweetly. Life has been hard for me. I died young and became a ghost, so of course, I cherish my existence. Oh, and by the way, I died as a virgin, she added coyly. Su Qian silently retorted in his mind, and so? Because I never experienced a man, my lingering resentment turned me into a ghost. As he processed this, he asked, how did the saintess of the heavenly sect become the flying swallow heroine? And why did she come to Yunzhou to suppress bandits? Su Su answered proudly, the heavenly sect follows the way of the heavens. To reach the highest level of enlightenment, one must undergo worldly trials. The principle is, to transcend the world, you must first immerse yourself in it. My master was ordered to travel the world, to gain experience and insight. Su Qian couldn't hold back and burst into laughter. So now she's a heroic, righteous figure, earning praise from everyone? People are probably all giving her a thumbs up and calling her the flying swallow heroine. I wonder how the elders of the heavenly sect would react if they knew this? Would they be so angry they'd cough up blood? Su Qian couldn't help but think that number 2 was full of contradictions. Su Su glanced at him and asked, do you have any more questions? If not, please release me soon. Su Qian's expression suddenly turned serious. Did Zhouming die by the orders of Yang Chuanan? Su Su shook her head quickly. I don't know. Su Qian followed up, was Li Miaozhen involved in this? Su Su shook her head repeatedly. I know for sure she wasn't. I've been by my master's side the whole time. Su Su's words had no solid evidence, but Su Qian chose to believe her. The feedback he had gotten from the Earthbook chat group indicated that number 2 was an ally of justice, trustworthy and honorable. However, Yang Chuanan's loyalty and his subordinates still need further investigation. Su Qian then asked about Li Miaozhen's cultivation level. Su Su answered straightforwardly, she's at the 5th rank. Su Qian nodded. What was the plan after you seduced me? I mean, in that particular aspect, would you have used illusions to fool me? Su Su gave him a knowing smile. Ah, sir, you men are all the same. She giggled. My physical body has long been destroyed. I can't share any physical pleasures with you, but I can possess a woman's body. If you see someone you fancy on the street, just say the word, and I'll possess her for you. Su Qian sternly refused. I am not that kind of person. Now, what is your connection with Yang Chuanan? Su Su pondered for a moment. Several months ago, the commander worked with my master to suppress bandits. They got along very well. As someone no longer a rookie in the bureaucracy, Su Qian quickly deduced. the true purpose behind Yang Chuanan's actions against the bandits. It was all a front to comply with inspections. With this realization, Suchan dropped his serious demeanor. One last question. Are you interested in following me? I don't care about the pleasures of the flesh, but your possession ability is quite useful. Susu immediately struck a submissive pose. I am willing to follow you, sir. Please release the seal. Suchan lifted the lid of the jar. Good. From now on, you'll stay with me. This jar will be your new home. Susu wailed in protest. Please remove the seal, sir. You're such a heartless man. I'll drain you dry one day. She threatened. With the lid securely closed, Susu's voice faded away. The chilling presence in the room dissipated. Meanwhile, at the night watchman's headquarters in the capital, Wei Yuan, dressed in dark green, reviewed documents at his desk. Before him stood 6 high-ranking officers, including Nangong Qian and Zhang Kaidai, all standing silently with their heads bowed. Without raising his head, Wei Yuan commented, "It seems life in the capital has made you too comfortable. Reports from the 12 peaks in the northeast were intercepted by agents of the witch god cult. How are you training your subordinates? If you're idle here, the borderlands could use your expertise." At that moment, a woman in black, holding a sealed letter, hurried inside. Lord Wei, an urgent dispatch has arrived from Yunzhou. The missive was carried not only by regular horses, but also by living mounts. These mounts were beasts from the southern jungles, belonging to the tribe of rat demons. They were gentle and swift, capable of traveling 1,000 miles in a single day. However, they had low reproduction rates, and were expensive to raise. Thus, they were reserved for urgent communications only. Wei Yuan took the letter, cutting it open with a letter opener. The secret message came from Jiang Luzhong, informing Wei Yuan that the provincial governor's entourage had reached the Yunzhou border. The letter also noted that they had just entered Yunzhou recently. By chance, Yang Yingying had obtained a crucial clue when they rescued one of Zhou Ming's foreign relatives. At the end of the letter, there was another mention. Suchan is advancing to the mind refinement stage. His promotion is imminent. However, I discovered, he is cultivating 2 visualization techniques simultaneously. One of these comes from the government office. I wonder if you, Lord Wei, granted it to him. The other technique is a Buddhist lion visualization. He has already mastered both at a high level. I have one unresolved question. Please enlighten me. I recall that martial artists at the Qi refinement stage struggle greatly to visualize even one diagram due to the limited strength of their primordial spirit. Additionally, practicing multiple diagrams can cause mental confusion and instability. It was only after I reached the mind refinement stage that I could visualize multiple diagrams. The other golden gongs in the office had similar experiences. So how is Suchan so exceptional that he can handle 2 diagrams at the Qi refinement stage? I've never heard of such a thing. It's hard to believe. I did not reveal this matter publicly. The usually stoic Wei Yuan, who could remain unfazed by calamity, had his gaze freeze momentarily. Suchan is advancing to the mind refinement stage. Suchan can visualize 2 diagrams. The 6 golden gongs standing before him noticed the change in Wei Yuan's expression. Their hearts tensed, sensing danger. This secret letter must contain critical information, and it's probably not good news. Soon after, they heard Wei Yuan exhale slowly and mutter 4 words with a sigh. Less than 2 months. The golden gongs exchanged silent glances, trying to decipher the hidden meaning behind his words. Wei Yuan recalled his own journey of martial cultivation and the years of relentless training. Even though he was once hailed as the most promising talent of the Great Feng dynasty in 500 years, destined to potentially reach the pinnacle of first rank, it had still taken him 3.5 months to progress from Qi refinement to mind refinement. Yet Suchan achieved this feat in under 2 months. His talent was far beyond what Wei Yuan had initially estimated. Previously, Wei Yuan admired Suchan mainly for his intelligence and insight. Intelligence is, after all, a type of talent. As for Suchan's cultivation speed, Wei Yuan had heard of him, filling his middle dantian with Qi energy. That alone had earned his respect. He estimated that by late spring next year, Suchan would likely advance to the mind refinement stage. A 5-month promotion for each rank was already exceptional for someone at the Golden Gong level. Combined with his innate affinity for the martial arts system's star potential, Suchan might one day become the next Northern King of Defense. But who would have thought that Suchan's talent was even more formidable than anticipated? Most astonishing of all, Suchan had unknowingly achieved something considered extraordinary. Dual visualization during Qi refinement. The Buddhist lion's roar technique was a rare skill, but it required a visualization diagram. These diagrams were far less powerful than formal cultivation diagrams. After all, the golden lion diagram was merely an auxiliary technique for the lion's roar. It was part of the technique set. Yet even so, Suchan's ability to dual visualize at Qi refinement was still a world-shocking accomplishment. With his vast knowledge, Wei Yuan quickly considered 3 possibilities. The first possibility was dual souls in one body. In the Western Buddhist kingdoms, there were many records of this phenomenon. It was said that when a great monk passed away, their spirit could merge with a newborn child. Such children not only retained the monks' complete memories, but were also born with innate mastery of Buddhist doctrines. Their primordial spirits were naturally stronger than normal, enabling dual visualization at an early stage. The second possibility was that Suchan was someone with extraordinary destiny and great fortune. Such individuals are extremely rare. Anyone blessed with great fortune tends to become a powerful figure known far and wide. For example, figures like the legendary Taoist Four Heaven Sage, or the witch god of the witch sect. The third possibility was assistance from a senior master. Those born under extraordinary mentorship, such individuals, start life at an entirely different level. At this point, Nangong Qianro cleared his throat awkwardly, abruptly making his presence known. He had been pushed forward as the spokesperson by the other Golden Gongs, with Yang Yin absent, and as Wei Yuan's adopted son, he was the only one present who could step up. Nangong Qianro figured that Wei Yuan was reluctant to send his adopted son to the border. He stiffened and asked, "Adoptive father, is there anything you need from me?" Wei Yuan continued reviewing the documents, before slowly pouring himself a cup of tea. With a calm tone, he replied, "Nothing much, just a minor matter." The Golden Gongs mentally groaned in frustration. A minor matter? You could barely keep your composure earlier. It was like the calm before a storm, and now it's all sunshine. Could it actually be good news? What was written in that letter? Wei Yuan had no intention of hiding it from them. Suchan is advancing to the mind refinement stage. The letter came from Jiang Luzhong at the Yunzhou border. He should have successfully broken through by now. The Golden Gongs nearly shouted out impossible. When he joined the Night Watchers, he was only at the peak of the Qi refinement stage, even though you mentioned his immense potential. Advancing from 9th rank to 7th rank in less than 2 months is unheard of. He's already meeting the minimum standard for a silver gong. Nangong Qianro thought, bitterly, if Yang Yin were here, he'd be grinning ear to ear. Similarly frustrated was Zhang Kaidai, who had once considered recruiting Suchan. He had even planned to lure him in, with wealth and women. But he hesitated, for fear of damaging his reputation as a Golden Gong. Now, it's too late for that. He had hesitated to act back then, and now the Golden Gongs were stunned, but couldn't hide their excitement. Suchan's talent is far beyond exceptional. Within days, our department might gain another Golden Gong. Fortunately, he didn't get stuck on that incident with the Zhu family. Hearing these words, Nangong Qianro's jealousy deepened. If this continues, my adoptive father might take him in too. Yang Yin doesn't care about competing with me, but that annoying Suchan is a real threat. At this point, Wei Yuan declared, dismissed. I don't want similar mistakes happening again. Qianro, prepare the carriage. We're heading to the palace. In the Imperial study, Emperor Yuanjing's calm voice echoed. I have already distributed the memorial, from Yunzhou to the cabinet. I want to hear your thoughts. The Minister of Revenue stepped forward. Your Majesty, I believe this is merely a misunderstanding, exaggerated by Zhang Xingying. Our transport offices across the empire are functioning without issue. Duke Gong interjected. There is no evidence to support Zhang Xingying's claims. They are not credible. We only need to investigate the Yunzhou transport office. More officials stepped forward to express agreement. Their stance was clear. They did not want a full investigation into the transport system. The transport offices were deeply entangled with complex power networks. They spanned from the imperial court to the martial world, involving countless individuals. Emperor Yuanjing looked at the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Wang, what is your opinion? The Prime Minister stepped forward. I agree that investigating only the Yunzhou office is sufficient. He then glanced at Wei Yuan, sharing a silent understanding. There was both disappointment and resignation. At this critical juncture, no one dared propose a full investigation of the transport offices. Doing so would be tantamount to declaring war on the entire bureaucratic system. Neither of the emperor's two rival factions would make such a fatal misstep, but both hoped the other might slip up. Emperor Yuanjing nodded and continued. The Viceroy of Qinzhou has sent a memorial, mentioning that various government offices in Qinzhou have established warning stele. The inscription reads, Heaven sees all truth, and justice cannot be deceived. The Viceroy believes this has a strong deterrent effect, and recommends that other provinces follow suit. The room became lively, with murmurs and discussions. One official, clearly moved, exclaimed, This is brilliant. A stroke of genius. It captures the spirit of what our great Feng should be. It inspires, unlike those poetic ramblings about moonlit flowers and starry dreams. I request that His Majesty issue an edict for all provinces to establish similar stele. Not everyone agreed, however, especially those wary of Viceroy Yang's rise. After all, he was affiliated with Yunlu Academy, but many recognized the public relations benefit for the court's image. If this spreads, it will bolster the court's standing among the people. It aligns with scholars' pursuit of reputation. The Prime Minister spoke. I propose we follow the example of Qinzhou. This was what Emperor Yuanjing had hoped for. Though he cultivated immortality and often distanced himself from politics, He saw himself as a capable ruler. If this initiative is credited to my reign, will cement my legacy. I not only want these steely. In all provincial offices, I will personally write the inscriptions. My own handwriting, stamped with the imperial seal. Wang Shoufu chuckled softly along with others. Viceroy Yang was a renowned poet. His literary prowess celebrated since his days as a top-ranking scholar in the imperial examinations. Yet here stood Wei Yuan, silent, his expression unreadable. The phrase carved on the steel, "Heaven knows, truth prevails." Wasn't this the poem Suchan had penned during his inspection? How had it suddenly become Yang Gong's work? Was it possible Suchan had merely adapted an older poem? Wei Yuan dismissed the idea swiftly. 800 Viceroy Yangs couldn't rival Suchan's poetic talent. The timeline matched too perfectly. Suchan's inspection coincided with the delegation passing through Qingzhou. The poem had likely spread from there. Wei Yuan frowned deeply. If this was Suchan's work, why had His Majesty overlooked mentioning him? Was this an intentional omission? Perhaps the Viceroy's administration had deliberately left out Suchan's name. These memorials were usually drafted by subordinates, who might manipulate details to flatter their superiors. Once established, it would be difficult to correct. Even if Yang Gong later clarified the truth, the damage might already be done. Public perception would be hard to reverse. Wei Yuan sighed internally. This was the price of fame. Suchan's rising prominence made such opportunistic moves inevitable. However, the truth would prevail in time. For now, it was a lesson on the importance of caution and humility. Still too young, too high profile, Wei Yuan thought to himself. At that moment, another minister asked, "Your Majesty, if I may inquire, was it explicitly stated in the memorial that this poem was Yang Gong's work?" The seasoned officials exchanged subtle glances. What exactly was this question implying? The memorial did not explicitly credit Yang Gong. The wording stated that Yang Gong ordered the steels to be erected, with the inscriptions as a cautionary measure. Wei Yuan explained calmly. Emperor Yuanjing raised a brow, asking, "And you believe this is not Yang Gong's work?" "Indeed, Your Majesty," Wei Yuan affirmed with a steady voice. "This poem is the creation of another. It is a rare opportunity to gain widespread acclaim and recognition, which should not be misattributed to Yang Gong." The ministers cast curious glances. How did he know it wasn't Yang Gong's work? Not written by Yang Gong? By another poet? Could it be a rising talent from Qingzhou? Emperor Yuanjing's gaze sharpened. When did Qingzhou produce such literary talent? How are you aware of this, Wei Yuan? Wei Yuan shook his head and replied, "This person is not from Qingzhou. Nor was the poem created there. It was written over a month ago." The court buzzed with murmurs. A month ago? Not Qingzhou. Who then? Wei Yuan? Surely you aren't trying to play games in front of His Majesty, remarked a suspicious official. Wei Yuan ignored the remark, speaking in an even tone. This poem was written by Suchan of the Night Watchers. The original inscription is still displayed in their headquarters. If any of you wish to see it, I can arrange for a visit. Murmurs spread rapidly throughout the hall. So it was him? Truly talented. Su Pingji's nephew. Wasn't he? Such a waste not sending him to the Imperial Academy. Even those who disliked Suchan couldn't help but sigh. Emperor Yuanjing's voice cut through. What exactly do you mean, Wei Yuan? Wei Yuan smiled warmly. Simply to help my subordinate gain recognition. Emperor Yuanjing scoffed lightly, but refrained from further comment. Meanwhile, at Yunlu Academy on Qingyan Mountain, a paper crane soared through the skies, passing over courtyards and pavilions, until it was caught by a hand, inside a refined chamber at the cliffside. The paper crane unfurled, revealing itself to be a meticulously folded paper swallow, intricately crafted. "Is this from Yang Ziqian?" Zhang Shen asked. "What does it say?" Li Mubai opened the letter, and quickly read through its contents. His face twisted in rage as he finished. Outrageous, shameless beyond belief. Clenching the letter, Li Mubai roared. "That scoundrel Yang Gong. He's a disgrace to scholars everywhere. I, Li Mubai, denounce him with utmost contempt." Zhang Shen shook his head, amused. "Ah, Li, you're too impulsive, which is why you lost to Wei Yuan all those years ago. See how composed Wei Yuan always is, unshaken like a mountain," Chintai added with a nod. "Indeed, Li's temper has always been his flaw. Show me the letter." Still seething, Li Mubai huffed, before angrily tossing the letter over. Zhang Shen read carefully. It says Yang Ziqian met the provincial envoy in Qingzhou, including Suchan. Yang Gong praised Su profusely, calling him the greatest genius of the past 5 centuries. As Zhang continued reading, he noticed a poem. "Ears shall hear, wrath shall rise, truth shall stand, justice is not easily bent, and heaven sees all." But at the bottom, there it was, attributed to Suchan. In an instant, the entire chamber was filled with furious exclamations. "Yang Gong is a disgrace. We must strip him of his title. A farewell poem is one thing, but he even took credit for this one? I refuse to accept it." Meanwhile, at the Yunzhou Inn, Suchan lifted the lid of the jug. A wisp of smoke spiraled out, forming the image of a stunning beauty, pouting in defiance. Stinking man, Suchan sighed. I was going to let you, but now I've changed my mind. Susu instantly switched her demeanor, pleading coquettishly. Oh, don't be like that, my lord. Suchan narrowed his eyes at her, observing her closely. Susu blinked and puffed out her chest playfully. What are you looking at, Just wondering how Ning Kaichan handled it, Su said. Ning who? A scholar, he replied casually. He fell in love with a ghost too. That ghost must have been after him for sure. Susu huffed. Why do you think that? Because I'm a ghost too. And I'm definitely interested in men. Suchan's eyes glinted. Alright, then explain your methods. Be honest, I'll decide your fate based on your sins. Susu put on an innocent face. I only prey on wicked bandits. Never on innocent people. Su's heart skipped a beat. Prey on? What exactly? Wait, never mind. I'm just curious. Tell me how ghosts operate. Susu giggled mischievously. Prey on their heads, of course. Suchan's expression darkened. Which head? Susu blinked, confused, before pointing to her forehead. Right here. Su's serious demeanor returned. Alright, I've decided. You've done too many misdeeds. Can't let you go just yet. Back into the jug you go. Suchan sealed the jug once more. He then left and knocked on Song Tingfeng's door. Song Tingfeng was planning to rest, hoping to regain some energy. Seriously? I was just about to relax, and now you knock? Suchan, however, was unsympathetic. If I can't sleep, why should I let you take it easy? Even though the circuit official isn't here, can't slack off. I plan to decode Zhou Ming's hidden messages. You and Guangxiao both have experience as night watchmen. Your insights could help me piece things together. Song Tingfeng felt both honored and guilty. To be honest, I'm not great at solving cases. Suchan replied seriously. Ever heard of this? Sometimes a casual remark can unravel mysteries, and an inexplicable impulse can push you to dig deeper. Every little action, I'll pay close attention to. Song Tingfeng recoiled slightly. Why are you so focused on me? What's your intention? Suchan's face darkened. Slip of the tongue. Okay, anyway, what are your thoughts on Miss Susu? Song Tingfeng winced at the mention of her name. Not finding her again would be my life's greatest regret. Suchan furrowed his brows. Wait, he still hasn't figured it out? That's not right. If I compare notes with Guangxiao, Susu's tricks would be exposed, unless they're keeping secrets from each other. Just then, Song Tingfeng warned him. By the way, don't mention Susu to anyone, not even Guangxiao. Suchan grinned widely. Is that because you trust me more than him? Song Tingfeng patted his shoulders. What gave you that idea? It's because you're even worse with women than me, so I'm not worried you'll judge me. You can't possibly stoop lower than I did. Suchan's mind raced in protest. Wait, what? We all went to the same brothel. Why am I the one with no limits? Just because my girl was prettier? I don't have any weird fetishes. Why does that make me worse? At that moment, Song Tingfeng added fuel to the fire. Every time people talk about you sleeping with a woman, you're always the talk of the town. They all curse you as a After the exchange, both Suchan and Song Tingfeng headed to Zhu Guangxiao's room. Song Tingfeng spoke up. Hey, what's wrong with you? You look all depressed. I noticed earlier, you weren't yourself. Zhu Guangxiao hesitated, opening his mouth but saying nothing. Finally, his gaze landed on Suchan. Suchan, puzzled, asked, Why are you looking at me? Do you also think I'm a scumbag or something? They quickly refocused and made their way to the room where Zhou Ming's belongings were stored. They conducted a thorough inspection. After some time, Song Tingfeng sighed. We've gone through these items so many times already. Zhu Guangxiao turned towards Suchan. You think there's a hidden clue linked to the code? Suchan calmly explained. Remember how I cracked the riddle? Thinking from the other person's perspective is key. This case is different from others like Sangpa. Sangpa's case had clear tracks we could follow. We just pulled the threads and found our way. But here, we have no other leads. Except this encoded message, Zhou Ming left. Our only hope is breaking it. Song Tingfeng nodded slowly, considering the idea. Leaving a code means it was meant for us to decipher. So the clue is probably in plain sight, something we've overlooked. Now it's up to us to recognize it. Suchan spread out the paper strip and chuckled. Good observation. Blind monk. He pointed to the two sets of numbers. These are clearly encoded as numbers. A number code usually relates to a cipher book or key. If we find that key, we'll crack the message. Zhu Guangxiao expressed doubt. Other than the word end, it's all numbers. He wouldn't just hide it in plain sight, like on a ledger. So where would there be a lot of numbers? Song Tingfeng pondered. There are plenty of sources. Books have numbers too. Suchan's eyes lit up. Great point. Let's assume this code refers to something in a book. If we follow that train of thought, which book would be easiest for us to access? Song Tingfeng suddenly became energized and started analyzing. 3-character classic, Great Code of Dafeng, Cloud State Chronicles, all common books around here. They quickly gathered these books. Zhu Guangxiao questioned. We've got the books, but how do the numbers correspond? What's the meaning? Suchan theorized. The numbers could refer to page numbers, or specific words on the page. That's the most basic deduction. Song Tingfeng flipped through the three-character classic, then shook his head. It can't be the pages. There aren't enough of them. Also, these characters, they don't match the code's logic. Zhu Guangxiao attempted another book. The Deep Waters of Mysterious Hua doesn't fit either. Suqian's face lit up. Stop wasting time with randomness. After that, they retrieved more commonly found books, attempting different methods, but they failed again. Song Tingfeng sighed, feeling discouraged. Suqian, you've lost your edge. You're not as sharp as usual. Suqian smirked, tired but playful. Isn't it like when your girlfriend has those low-energy days? Song Tingfeng flushed in embarrassment. Why are you talking about my girlfriend now? Suqian held back laughter, thinking, I've been awake for 13 days. You expect me to be quick-witted? Even that useless ghost Su Su can't keep me energized. What's her worth then? But then again, a ghost like her isn't about raw power. It's about utility. Having her around is like having a whole pond of fish, way easier than keeping all my human spares like Huiqing. When I want one, I can just reel them in. Suqian furrowed his brow and said, let's get someone to bring sweets. Best way to fight mental fatigue is a sugar rush. Before long, Izu made them longan egg flour sweet soup and raisin pastries. Without exception, all of these were extremely sweet. Suqian, the short man among them, chose the longan egg flour sweet soup and pushed the almond tofu pudding to Song Tingfeng. Song Tingfeng immediately perked up, saying, how did you know I like sweet tofu pudding? Suqian thought to himself that he could tell from the beginning, but said out loud with a smile, because we're brothers. Seeing you all teary-eyed, I figured you could use some tofu pudding to soothe your heart. Song Tingfeng rolled his eyes, knowing Su was hinting at the matter with Miss Su. With a half-smile, Song Tingfeng said, speaking of which, Miss Su is truly amazing. A rare woman who can spar with me for 300 rounds. You wouldn't understand. You're a playboy. I'm not anymore. When you first joined the Night Watchman, I advised you to pursue the junior officer Qinglu. You hesitated and didn't agree, then turned around and got involved with Fu Xiang. I knew then you were one of my kind. If Donkey Bone married you, it'd be like a flower stuck in a pile of manure. Suqian offered a silent prayer, though Donkey Bone wasn't as pretty as Fu Xiang. Calling him manure was... Song Tingfeng protested. I didn't say he's manure. I meant you. Suqian snorted. Then why say a flower stuck in manure? After finishing the desserts, as the renowned detective Su Ningyan was in poor form, Song Tingfeng took the lead in deducing the case. Let's think about it differently. If I were Zhou Ming, I'd definitely hide the cipher book somewhere the patrol team could always find, but also somewhere unobtrusive. Zhu Guangxiao asked. But we've already searched Zhou Ming's place. There's no hidden compartments or suspicious items, and we compared the books he left behind earlier. Nothing seemed unusual. Song Tingfeng rubbed his chin. Maybe it's not the books at all. Maybe it's something written inside them, but it's not the books. Mingyan, do you think it's possible? Suqian clapped his hands in approval. Well done, Tingfeng. Your sharp mind has successfully caught my attention. You're a genius held back by that fancy woman. So what do you think it could be? It's neither a book nor anything among Zhou Ming's belongings, but must have a certain thickness. Suqian suddenly had a realization. At the same time, Song Tingfeng also understood something, and immediately shouted, it's the almanac. It's both a book and not a book, noteworthy yet ordinary. Zhu Guangxiao, the diligent and honest worker, accurately found a thick almanac among Zhou Ming's belongings. Suqian let out a long sigh of relief, his eyes sparkling with excitement. That's it. The three eagerly opened the almanac. Starting from the first word, they counted to the 162nd word. It read, previous day. Then came the 347th word, until finally, they pieced together a phrase that made no sense. The end day, Guangding 15. Clearly that was wrong too. Next, they tried another method, using page numbers instead of word counts. With page numbers, each number corresponded to a specific date in the almanac. The sequence they formed was April 6th, January 15th, January 29th, January 25th, January 26th. But clearly, this was also incorrect. At this moment, Zhu Guangxiao suggested an idea. Perhaps we should first decipher the word end. It's the only word standing alone, and at the front. Suqian rubbed his brow. Do you have any ideas? Song Tingfeng responded. Lord Inspector and Jiang Jinluo have already studied the code. If the word end points to a certain secret code in the Yamen, Lord Jiang and the inspector should have found it. Suqian smirked. What could the inspector find? He's just good at guessing riddles. But as soon as he said that, he froze. He remembered the time in police academy. 11 professors of criminal psychology once said, a person's behavior is closely tied to their habits. What were Zhou Ming's habits? It's riddles. Yang Yingying once mentioned that Zhou Ming loved playing riddles while drinking. So when Zhou Ming thought about hiding evidence and leaving clues, he would naturally lean toward riddles. This led them to infer that the only word in the two sets of ciphers was also a riddle. Suchan rubbed his temples and asked, I remember someone saying, that place on Huanghua Street was about dogs. Song Tingfeng nodded listlessly. Yeah, it's about dogs. So what? Suchan continued. The character Imo can be broken down into black and dog, and the information from Huanghua Street links to Zhou Ming. It matches a clue left in a riddle game. I think it fits now. Song Tingfeng suddenly perked up. So you think the cipher points to dog-related matters. But what does this black represent? Isn't it too presumptive to determine the cipher refers to dogs, just from the character dog? Suchan smiled, but didn't answer. Instead, he went outside and called over a few officials. What's the matter? Suchan asked directly. How much do you know about Huanghua Street? The official replied, Huanghua Street? That place is a mess. It's quiet during the day, but at night it's a chaotic mix. All sorts of people show up. Street thieves and shady wanderers, even bandits from outside come there. Huanghua Street appears to sell dog meat on the surface, but it's actually a black market, dealing in contraband and conducting secretive transactions. Suchan frowned. Have you ever been to that black market? Izu suddenly looked embarrassed, saying he had once gone to buy dog meat. Suchan's brows furrowed even more. What's the need to act so guilty over buying dog meat? It's not as if you were caught red-handed doing something shameful. Izu noticed Suchan's displeasure and shyly said in a small voice, I went to new shop number 6. Buying dog meat referred to that. The one who spoke the classic phrase shook his head and sighed. Still too young, even when looking for Si Chong. He's this hesitant and unwilling to admit it. Suddenly, Suchan noticed something. Wait. New number 6? Izu's expression returned to normal, and he nodded in response to Suchan's query. The black market shops are named after celestial stems and earthly branches. Suchan nodded in understanding. You may leave now. Once Izu had closed the door and left, and as his foot, Suchan turned to his colleagues and said, the situation is now very clear. The black dog clearly refers to the shady dog meat business. Song Tingfeng continued. The remaining cipher should tell us who to look for, or how to navigate the black market. Suchan spoke confidently. The answer lies in the almanac. Zhu Guangxiao looked at him and said, we've already examined it. The almanac theory isn't wrong, but how could Zhou Ming leave such a crucial clue among his possessions? However, it wouldn't make sense for Zhou to keep such vital information in his belongings. After a moment of thought, Suchan said, so it must be an older almanac, not the one from this year's Dafeng's 6th centennial. Finding the correct almanac would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. Zhou Ming certainly isn't that foolish. I suspect that particular almanac holds some special meaning to him. If I'm not mistaken, it should be the one from 14 years ago, when Zhou Ming was first appointed to Yunzhou. Song Tingfeng immediately stood up and walked out. The old almanacs from 14 years ago are no longer at the relay stations. Only the yamen and the bookstores still have them. Just to be safe, I'll go to the bookstore myself. After brewing tea for a short while, he rode back on horseback, bringing the old almanac. Suchan fetched paper and ink and laid them out on the desk. Just as Zheng Yu began to write, he suddenly felt that his own script wasn't suitable for formal occasions. He pushed Zhu Guangxiao forward to serve as a substitute. If they followed the previous method, matching the ciphers to the word count, the resulting conclusion would still be as nonsensical as before. However, using page numbers instead, page 162 began with May 12th. The implication was that their actions should commence at night, then proceed to the black market. Next came the second set of ciphers, 347412. This page's date was January 15th. Suchan glanced at the almanac entry for that day, and suddenly had a flash of understanding. Everything became clear. He finally understood. 162 and 347 referred to page numbers, while 412 referred to the number of words. On that page, the fourth word, and the first two words combined to form, Ding 15. Song Tingfeng blurted out, the black market shop, Ding 15. Suchan nodded, relieved, and leaned back in his chair, letting out a long sigh. He then picked up the paper on the table, but upon seeing it, he exclaimed in shock, Guangxiao, your handwriting is atrocious. It's impossible to read. Zhu Guangxiao retorted indignantly, is your handwriting any better? Song Tingfeng added proudly, my calligraphy isn't inferior to scholars. When I was young, I scrimped. Suchan responded, I grew up poor. To practice writing, I used a brush dipped in water in the courtyard. I practiced like that for 20 years. Zhu Guangxiao handed the brush over. Then you two write something and show me. Suchan and Song Tingfeng exchanged a glance, and walked away, saying, calligraphy isn't meant to be flaunted. Nodding in agreement, Suchan said he wasn't interested in comparisons. Returning to his room, he took off his shoes, climbed into bed and sat cross-legged. To prepare himself for the trip to the black market that night, he confirmed his condition was still good. Calculating the time, Huijing and Lingen should have received my letter by now. I hope the letter will turn Huijing's anger into joy, even though I don't know how I offended her. Biao Biao, that simple-minded girl, will definitely be moved. Compared to Totai, that innocent foodie, She's easier to please, Suchan thought happily. As for whether the two princesses would exchange letters, or let others see them, that was highly unlikely. First, Huijing and Lingen didn't get along, so it was impossible they would exchange letters. Moreover, my letter was somewhat ambiguous. Girls in this era are concerned about reputation, so they wouldn't show such letters to anyone. Second, both Huijing and Biao are mature princesses, mature enough to be presented to the court, with the freedom and right to receive and send letters. The emperor and concubines wouldn't intervene, and others wouldn't dare to tamper with a princess's mail. Therefore, as a lowly gong, writing ambiguous letters to two princesses was nearly risk-free in terms of exposure. In the palace of the capital, Lingen complained, "Today's banquet is in the East Palace, hosted by Crown Prince Brother, with celestial siblings invited. There's only half an hour left, and Huijing still isn't here?" The Crown Prince said with a smile, "Someone has already been sent to call her. She'll come after her rest." His voice drew the attention of the other princes and princesses, gathered in the hall. "Today marks the 4-day meeting, and the sale of a secret delicacy. I invited my siblings here to try it." Mentioning this popular topic, the princes and princesses began chatting enthusiastically. "The taste of this chicken essence is truly irresistible," one said, "but it makes you thirsty. This stuff shouldn't be eaten too much. A light diet is the way to maintain health." One prince quietly remarked, "Young people don't need to worry about health." Lingen raised her chin and said haughtily, "Do you know who invented chicken essence?" This question stumped the princes and princesses. Pressed by their curiosity, Lingen's expression grew more smug. "It was Suchan. He's one of my subordinates." The fourth prince frowned. "Suchan? Isn't he one of Huijing's people?" Lingen immediately boasted, "Suchan is mine now. He swore allegiance to me." At that moment, Huijing's calm voice came from outside the room. "Whose person is Suchan?" Lingen, not wanting to back down, appeared to respond firmly at first, but then faltered, puffing her cheeks and shouting loudly, "Half and half." Huijing's scolding tone followed. "This foolish sister of mine, using the most arrogant tone to say the most cowardly thing, is actually rather endearing. I can tolerate Suchan's balancing act, mainly because my foolish sister Lingen poses. Her so-called poaching is just to annoy me. If it were another prince trying to snatch my people, I wouldn't have shown such leniency." Huijing walked up to Lingen, looked down on her and said, "Move aside. I'm sitting here." Lingen raised her head, but all she could see were Huijing's eyes. She couldn't see her lower face, because of Huijing's well-endowed chest blocking her view. "This sister not only has more talent than me, but also a better figure. Other than father's favor, there's nothing in which I can surpass Huijing. I can't win in a fight, and I can't argue against her status as a royal princess. Moreover, Huijing is a scholar, and everything she says is refined." The more Lingen thought about it, the angrier she got. At this moment, the crown prince stepped in to ease the tension. "Huijing, don't take Lingen's words seriously. You're her elder sister." Huijing finally let Lingen off the hook, and moved toward another chair nearby. With Huijing's arrival, the banquet soon began. As they were eating, the crown prince casually remarked, "Have you heard about the matter at Jin Yu's study?" The fourth prince immediately asked, "What about the World Cup and Chao Yunya?" The crown prince nodded. "The matter concerning Chao Yunya is beyond our control. The court and father will handle it. What's impressive is how the stone tablet incident caught everyone's attention." The fourth prince commented cryptically, "Clear understanding and resolute action. Truly, it's hard to deceive the heavens." Lingen responded nonchalantly, "I don't care much for that poem." But Huijing's eyes lit up. "What a good poem. Who wrote it?" The crown prince replied, "Suchan." Lingen immediately jumped up, exclaiming loudly, "What a great poem." She acted as if she had written it herself. Huijing smiled. "That's typical of him." Lingen quipped back, "You talk as if you know him so well." Huijing glared at her foolish sister, scaring her into shrinking her neck. Suchan is someone who despises evil with a passion. He ignores minor troubles, and isn't shaken by great tribulations, unlike those hypocritical scholars, who only talk a good game. The crown prince interjected. "He even drew his sword against the silver luo." Huijing added, "Just the other day, I was chatting with Duke Wei. He said that ever since Suchan started his job, he hasn't taken a single coin illicitly." Lingen glared back at Huijing. "What gives you the right to say he ignores minor troubles?" Huijing continued, "Suchan may be loyal and upright, but he's also reckless. He spends his nights away from home, has close ties with the courtesan Fu Xiang from Yinmei Pavilion, and—" Lingen's smile gradually disappeared. Her wide, almond-shaped eyes filled with disbelief. "You're lying," she shouted, suddenly losing her appetite. She threw down her chopsticks and stormed out, grabbing her skirts. She sashayed away, grumbling under her breath. As she muttered to herself, she seemed to say Suchan couldn't possibly have done that. After the banquet ended, Huijing returned to her personal residence. In her chamber, she sat in meditation. Recently, she had secretly advanced in her qi training. She had discussed this with Duke Wei during their last chat. Huijing was highly talented, but she had always kept a low profile. As she grew older, however, she felt she could now afford to improve her cultivation. Her decision was largely influenced by the fact that the emperor hadn't mentioned any plans for the princess's marriages all year. The emperor's own immersion in cultivation and the empress's more laid-back attitude meant that he saw no need to bring it up. At that moment, a maid reported, "Your Highness, a letter has arrived from Qinzhou." Huijing frowned. Qinzhou? Could it be a letter from Master Ziyang? Opening the envelope, she immediately saw it was from Suchan. The letter was lengthy, spanning 2 pages. Focusing intently, she read further. When she came to the part about the Chao Yunya corruption case, her face grew solemn. But as she read on, her shock began to fade. She encountered phrases such as, growing out of mud, yet untainted, pure amidst filth, yet not showy, straight and upright, not sprawling. Its fragrance extends far. Its purity stands tall. It can only be admired from afar, not trifled with up close. Princess Huijing became immersed in the poetic imagery, a vision of a lotus in full bloom forming in her mind. She sighed, "It's a shame Su Ningyan doesn't study. What a pity." As she spoke, she tilted the envelope, spilling out a dried lotus petal. "Is this boy confessing his love for me?" she mused. "If I send this letter to the palace, he'll lose his head 10 times over." She carefully folded the letter, placed it with the petal inside a rarely read book, and then happily called her maid to grind ink. She began copying the elegant lines from the letter. Huijing allowed a faint smile to grace her lips. Meanwhile, on Lingen's side, her personal maid watched as Lingen slumped over her desk, muttering, "What's wrong with Her Highness? Perhaps the crown princess bullied her again." Another maid chimed in, "Your Highness, why bicker with Huijing?" Lingen snapped, "It's not her, it's that dog servant." The 2 maids exchanged a look. "Dog servant? Your Highness, it's been ages since that servant was sent away. What did he do now?" Lingen frowned. "I don't even know. I just feel uneasy." At that moment, another maid entered, reporting, "Your Highness, a palace guard has delivered a letter for you." Lingen looked up. "A letter? From Qinzhou?" The maid replied, "Yes, from Qinzhou." Lingen blinked in confusion. "Who would send me a letter from Qinzhou?" The maid outside the door said she didn't know. Lingen, not one to think too hard, concluded, "If I can't figure it out, I'll just open it and see." Her personal maid, noticing her hesitation, called out, "Bring it in." The outside maid handed the letter to the one opening the door. It was the delicate palace maid whom Suchan had once patted on the bottom. She glanced at the letter, but being a clever girl, she stopped reading further. Still, she had already guessed who it was from. With a sly smile, she announced, "Your Highness, the dog servant has written you a letter." Lingen immediately turned her face, tilted her snowy chin, and replied coldly, "Too long. Not interested." In truth, she wanted to read it. But just thinking of how that dog servant appeared so loyal on the surface, yet was a secret lecher who flirted shamelessly, made her feel irritated. The 2 maids, familiar with Lingen's temperament, stifled their laughter as they placed the letter on the desk. They exchanged a knowing look before saying, "We'll leave now, Your Highness. Just call if you need anything." As the door closed, Lingen darted forward, snatched the letter like a gust of wind, and eagerly began reading it. The long night stretched on, and sleep was far from her mind. Her Highness's noble and graceful image seemed to linger in her mind, like a voice softly echoing in her ears. Half a month apart, and she missed him terribly. Lingen couldn't explain why, but a sweet smile unconsciously curved her lips into an alluring shape. Just then, the door quietly opened a crack. 2 personal maids peeked through the gap, watching inside. They were stunned to see Princess Lingen seated at the table, utterly engrossed. Sometimes she giggled, sometimes she looked smug, and at times she appeared nervous. The 2 maids quietly backed away. "Do you know what's written in that letter?" "Don't ask about the master's affairs," one maid whispered. "You remember what the palace matrons taught us. That Suchan must be something, for the princess to care so much after." Lingen read eagerly until the end, realizing the story had concluded. The dog servant had written about a lotus cult in Qinzhou, its red lotuses vibrant as fire, reminding him of Her Highness, in her stunning red dress. In the quiet of her room, Princess Lingen could hear her heart pounding. Her cheeks burned with heat. How dare he write her such a letter? If it were ever leaked, she would be utterly disgraced. The thought sent shivers through her, and she considered tearing it up, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. This was the first time in her life she had ever received such a letter. The story was thrilling, the words captivating. Su Ningyan's writing was so eloquent. A clever idea came to her. She tucked the dried, withered petal, along with the letter, inside a thick book. It was a rare edition her mother had given her, a place no one would think to look. Shortly afterward, her 2 personal maids heard her call and entered. "Help me get changed." I'll be wearing red tonight, and soon. Lingyan changed into a fiery red dress, raised her chin, and confidently declared, "Behold my stunning elegance." The maidservants, puzzled, asked, "Your Highness, are you no longer upset?" Lingyan, with her charming almond-shaped eyes, replied sternly, "Who dares call him a dog-servant? You shall address him as Lord Su." She thought to herself, "My dog-servant is mine to call as I please." Meanwhile, at Inmei Pavilion, the plum blossoms were in full bloom, and the courtyard was tranquil. Fu Xiang reached out her hand, gently brushing the plum branches, her presence harmonizing with the scenery. The maids in the courtyard sighed. Since Lord Su's departure, their mistress often sighed as well. Every 3 days, she sent someone to inquire, "Has Lord Su returned to the capital?" She barely showed her face in the tea house anymore. When she did go out, it was only for a quick drink, and she would leave the guests behind. Oddly enough, the guests weren't upset. They adored Fu Xiang all the more. Following the famous verse, "Fragrance drifts faintly at dusk," another poem, "A beauty draws the pearl curtain," also gained popularity. Through skillful promotion, a story was spun around this poem. It was said that the talented Lord Su had made Fu Xiang cry, and in his desperation to console her, he downed 3 cups of strong wine. With the wine flowing, his inspiration surged, and this famous poem was born. Many scholars believed this tale, seeing Fu Xiang as a muse who brought good fortune. They thought that by associating with her, they too might create verses worthy of lasting fame. This was clearly an example of sensationalized publicity. Just then, a young servant ran into the courtyard, waving a letter. "Madam Fu Xiang, a letter has arrived from Qinzhou. It's from Lord Su." Fu Xiang's worried expression vanished. She barely managed to maintain her poise as she hurried over. She resembled a young girl receiving an unexpected gift, her joy uncontrollable. After taking the letter, she quickly returned to her room, eager to open it. Half a month had passed since they last met. "I miss you so much. My colleagues invited me to Jiafangxi along the way, but I refused. Without your melodies, Jiafangxi would be lifeless. Our next meeting feels so far away. I know you miss me terribly too." Fu Xiang felt sweet warmth in her heart, until she reached this line. "If your longing becomes unbearable, remember to trim your nails." A faint groan escaped Fu Xiang's lips from her room. The maids outside flinched in surprise. After a long pause, Fu Xiang lay gently on her bed, holding the letter and the petals. She reminisced about the moments shared with Su Bai Pu. Meanwhile, at Sixiangjian, the letter arrived late, just in time for dinner. Chu Kaiwei sat in the dining hall, reading the letter Su Ningyan sent her. She felt a small burst of happiness. Yuzhou has a delicacy called yellow sprout cabbage with ham. Ham is a unique southern specialty. Qinzhou's culinary treasures are countless. Let me recount them all. Reading on, Chu Kaiwei's eyes widened. She swallowed her saliva audibly. After finishing the letter, she looked at Sixiangjian's usual fare, and found it suddenly unappealing. The food seemed hard to swallow. She slammed the table, stood up, and cursed, "Damn you, Su Ningyan." Then she shouted, "I'm going to Qinzhou, over at Su Mansion." Su's aunt spent her days sipping tea, tending flowers, and occasionally taking her servant to stroll the streets. Inner city life was more bustling and secure than the outer city. She could walk around without fearing bullies. Despite her age, when she went out, men still stared at her in awe. It was terribly annoying. When Su Lingyue entered the hall, she saw her mother's bent figure pruning flowers. The loose gown draped over her lithe form revealed her full curves. Su Lingyue couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. The little rascal beamed. "Mom, I'm home." Auntie looked him over carefully. "How's Lining doing at school?" Yes, the little rascal had started school. It was something that Su Erlang decided when he last visited home. This wasn't out of dissatisfaction. He simply didn't want to see his little sister wasting her education. So, Su Ershu arranged for her to attend a well-known school in the inner city. The teacher was an elderly scholar, renowned for his teaching. Although he was a scholar, it was overkill to have him teach children, but what could they do? The parents paid generously. The kids who attended this school weren't from ordinary families either. Su Lingyue sighed and gently said, "The teacher said he's always the loudest and most attentive when he reads, but after reading, he forgets everything." Finally, today, he managed to recite 3 lines of the 3-character classic. The teacher was so thrilled, he nearly wept. Auntie clucked her tongue in disapproval. "You silly boy, you need to use your brain to read. Don't let it go in one ear and out the other." The little rascal immediately retorted, "I'm not silly. You are, because you gave birth to me." Auntie nearly exploded with anger. She grabbed the little rascal and gave him a good spank, but the tough-skinned Su Lingling wasn't afraid at all, yelling back, "I'm not silly. Mom is." After a while, Auntie got tired. She suddenly remembered something. "Your big brother sent a few letters back. They're on the table. Lingyue, go take a look." Su Lingyue's eyes lit up. She eagerly ran over. There were 3 letters, one for her father, and one for her mother. Su Lingyue took one and said, "Mom, Big Brother sent one to you too. Auntie's watery eyes sparkled with joy. Imagine that rascal still thinking of me. The little rascal piped up, I'll read it. After a few days of school, he fancied himself a scholar. Su Lingyue handed her father's letter to him. The little rascal took it and glanced at it. Wow, Big Brother can write so much, and his writing is even better than mine. Annie chided. Are you going to read it or not? The little rascal seriously began reciting. At the start of life, human nature is inherently good. Annie frowned. You only know those 3 lines, don't you? At this point, Su Lingyue had finished reading her brother's letter. She hadn't expected that even from far off Yunzhou, Big Brother would still care about her. A smile blossomed on Su Lingyue's delicate face. This petal he sent me, I'll put it in a sachet. Thinking this, she suddenly remembered something. She snatched the letter from the little rascal's hand, unfolded it, and glanced at it. She muttered, take good care of Lin Yin. Andy's face darkened. She knew it. That little brat had ulterior motives. Even though he was thousands of miles away, he still found a way to send a letter just to annoy her. At dusk, in a nondescript tavern near Huanghua Street, Su Qian and Song Tingfeng, wearing cloaks, arrived just ahead of Xiao Jing. Su Qian boldly slapped some silver on the table. Waiter, the bill. Song Tingfeng frowned. Qian, where did you get all that silver? I've never even seen you use copper coins. Su Qian just smiled and said nothing. Copper coins are beneath me, he said. Given my noble aura, Song Tingfeng's suspicion deepened. That coin you just used, it looks familiar. It's missing a corner. Yesterday I lost 3,000 silver pieces, also missing a corner. That might be my silver. Su Qian grinned, full of confidence. Be more sure of yourself. It is your silver. I picked it up in front of your door. Song Tingfeng exploded in anger, gritting his teeth and cursing wildly. The more he cursed, the more furious he got. Finally, in a fit of rage, he started chasing Su Qian. They soon arrived at Huanghua Street. All 3 of them donned black robes, as most people here preferred to conceal their true identities. Su Qian surveyed the surroundings. All the shops appeared to be selling dog meat. Soon, they followed the numbers on the shop signs and found shop number 15. From the outside, it looked just like another shop selling dog meat, but if you listened closely, you could hear the voices of women inside. At this moment, the shopkeeper asked cautiously, Gentlemen, how much dog meat would you like? Song Tingfeng inquired, how much for the meat outside, and how much for the meat inside? The shopkeeper immediately smiled. The dog meat outside is 1 qian silver per jin. Inside, it's 3 qian silver. Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao were a bit annoyed. To charge 3 qian silver for this kind of thing. Su Qian, on the other hand, wasn't surprised. Just visiting the red sleeves in the capital costs 10 liang silver. 3 qian is nothing. What's more, I'm not paying. The shopkeeper eagerly led the 3 inside. Su Qian paused for a moment. He had noticed something odd about the shopkeeper's leg. As they entered, the sounds from inside grew even clearer. The place was poorly soundproofed. If Chun Gu were here, he thought, he'd shout, follow my lead. Forward, march. 1, 2. At that moment, the shopkeeper chuckled, saying, the girls are all busy. Why not wait a bit? I can get you a jin of cooked meat. Su Qian muttered internally. It's barely dark out, and the girls here are already busy. Business at this black market dog meat shop is booming, but he had no intention of waiting. So he stood abruptly, picked a random room, and kicked the door open. This, of course, triggered an angry uproar. Several men inside still glared at Su Qian and his companions with fury. Su Qian, forcing a dry smile, said, room number 15 is reserved tonight. Now get out. All expenses are covered by Mr. Song. As soon as he said this, a fight between the customers and the trio was inevitable, but within just a quarter of an hour, those fierce-looking ruffians were beaten black and blue and angrily stomped out of the shop. Inside the room, Su Qian gathered all the women together. He sternly ordered, everyone stay put and keep quiet. Sit down with your heads lowered. No one leaves this room without my permission. After saying that, he stepped out of the room. The shopkeeper approached, holding a cleaver. So, you're not here to buy meat, but to cause trouble? Su Qian didn't bother explaining. He fished around in his pocket for a moment and took out half of a jade pendant. Do you recognize this? He asked. The shopkeeper's eyes fell on the jade, and his pupils narrowed slightly. What's your relation to Zhou Ming? He asked. That's not something you need to know, Su Qian replied. I'm just asking if you recognize the jade. The shopkeeper hesitated briefly, then hobbled off to a room to the east. When he returned, he and a booklet. The 2 halves of the jade fit together perfectly. So, you're here for this, the shopkeeper said, handing over the items. Zhou Ming left these with me. Su Qian gave him a long look. Aren't you curious who we are? The shopkeeper replied irritably. Would you tell me if I asked? Su Qian nodded. No, we wouldn't, but you handed these over too easily. The shopkeeper. Zhou Ming instructed me. The jade piece is the token. If it's not presented, I don't not even to Zhou Ming himself. I don't need to know who you are. I only recognize the jade pendant, not the person. Suchan took the half-jade pendant and the ledger. He pondered over the boss's words. Only recognized the jade, not the person. Was it because Zhou Ming, who was retrieving the evidence, might not actually be Zhou Ming? The old man's thinking is really meticulous. This is a ledger, recording the disappearance of military supplies under the command of Shirsi. Every entry is clearly noted. With this evidence, Zhang Xuanfu can summon and interrogate the second-rank commander. Even if a direct conviction isn't possible, now we have the evidence. The mission to Yunzhou can come to an end. Su Qian secured the items. What is your relationship with Zhou Ming? Why did he trust you with the ledger? The shop owner, leaning on the doorframe, answered casually. I used to be a wandering warrior. I offended a government officer by meddling in affairs, and he had me beaten. My leg was broken in that incident. They intended to bury me alive. It was Lord Zhou who saved me. I owe him my life. I learned to live with a limp, but I gave up my wandering ways. I settled in Baidi City. When he handed me the items, I sensed something might happen to him, but there was only so much I could do. I might not be able to repay the life-saving grace, but I can at least safeguard these items. Su Qian nodded. He cupped his hands in a gesture of gratitude. In his heart, he added, "Leave the revenge to us." The shop owner chuckled and said, "How about I cut some dog meat for you to take?" Su Qian didn't refuse. He took out 5 taels of silver, but the shop owner declined to accept it. Su Qian explained that it wasn't for the dog meat. It's for covering Mr. Song's expenses. Soon after, the 3 left the shop. Song Tingfeng joked, "Since we can't return yet, why not stay here? I've already paid the bill." Su Qian responded sarcastically, "You're so thoughtful. Then you go back. They're still lingering around." Song Tingfeng was momentarily silenced. He thought Su Ningyan's way of speaking was really crude. We scholars should say it this way instead. They are waiting to be at your disposal. Night gradually deepened. In a large mansion in Baidi City, Li Miaozhen sat cross-legged on the bed, meditating. He concentrated and sensed for a while, but found that his sister still hadn't returned. 3 little gongs, officers, should be no match for her. Not to mention that Su Qian, a libertine worn down by indulgence. There's no way they could cause trouble. She should have charmed them in broad daylight and extracted the information easily. Why hasn't she returned yet? Could it be, did she disobey my order and get entangled with him? No, that's impossible. She's always obedient. She's been by my side for so many years, and she's always followed instructions well. In life, she was from a good family, and even after death, she harbored little resentment. Also, it's known that Su Qian wouldn't be able to handle being drained. Maybe she just got playful. Li Miaozhen took a deep breath and decided to sleep, feeling that his analysis was reasonable. But by the next morning, when Li Miaozhen woke up, his sister was still missing. He finally realized something was wrong. Li Miaozhen immediately drew a crude Taiji diagram on the table. He created a simple 8 trigrams array, using powder and placing items like mirrors, parrots, and other tools in specific positions. With a catalyst, he activated the formation. The paper figure surprisingly stood up, but after a few seconds, it collapsed again, turning back into a regular paper figure. Li Miaozhen's expression grew serious. This paper figure was something my sister had attached herself to. It still carried her presence. It should have led me to her. There are 3 possible reasons for this outcome. 1. She has met with an accident, and her soul has dissipated. 2. She has been sealed away. 3. She has left Baidi City. She has moved beyond the paper figure's sensing range. Of these 3 possibilities, whichever it is, it indicates something unusual has happened to my sister. Li Miaozhen's mind instantly conjured up Su Qian's irritating face. To solve the problem, I'll have to seek him out again. Song Tingfeng smirked and said, "Are you done reading? Is the ledger real?" Su Qian rolled his eyes, annoyed. "Do you even know what reconciliation means? You have to cross-examine the accused in person too." Song Tingfeng stretched lazily and waved his hand. "Yet you still read it so attentively." Su Qian replied, "At least I skimmed through it, so I have an overview." Then he glanced at Zhu Guangxiao, who was meditating. "Do you want to search for Miss Susu?" Zhu Guangxiao gave him a look, but said nothing. Su Qian asked in confusion, "Still undecided? You and Miss Susu have already consummated your relationship, and didn't you hold your sister-in-law's hand too? She shamelessly asked you for 2 taels of silver. Is she that desperate for money? Her old man treats her like an asset. Forget it. I won't insult her. Have you met my aunt? My aunt is beautiful, right? She's one of the top beauties around here. When my second uncle married her, the dowry was only 20 taels. Why does your fiancé think she's worth so much?" Zhu Guangxiao remained silent, but in his mind, he couldn't help but recall Miss Susu's seductive charm. Her alluring demeanor flashed before him. At that moment, a voice called out from downstairs, "Ningyan, there's a guest." Su Qian quickly headed down. In the inn's main hall, he saw a woman in close-fitting clothes, her figure as agile as a panther. She was a valiant and striking beauty. Su Qian quietly swallowed. She doesn't look like a saint of the Taoist Tianzong. Weren't they supposed to be emotionless? And here you are, a legendary heroine. Su Qian smiled and said, "General Li, we meet again." Li Miaozhen returned the gesture with a fist salute. In her heart, She silently muttered a curse. This guy's dark circles have deepened again. He must have had his energy drained by May. Alarmed, Suchan invited him to sit on the side. He probably came here for May, but he still hasn't gotten her. May's parents must have realized something is wrong. Suchan pondered how to deal with it. Return May to him? But I can't bear to. She's such a beautiful producer wife. Just looking at her is delightful, and her possession ability is quite useful. At this moment, Li Miaozhen spoke first. Did you see a girl named Susu yesterday? Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao shuddered in shock. They whipped their heads around. Cold sweat trickled down their faces. Suchan suppressed a grin. The moment of public embarrassment has come. The two junior brothers are about to be exposed. Suchan chuckled and said, yes, I did. And she had a deep chat with me and two others. We formed an unbreakable bond. Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao's guilty faces turned to shock. They exclaimed together, no, she bonded with us. What does this guy have to do with it? Li Miaozhen stared at their changing expressions. She was a bit confused. From Suchan's words, did Susu also extract something from these two? She glanced at Suchan again and thought, May must be in Suchan's hands. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said that. Li Miaozhen said apologetically, I was inconsiderate. Would you be willing to return him to me? The two brothers' faces changed, showing curiosity and confusion. They looked at Li Miaozhen. Suchan smiled and said, framing a court official, stealing confidential information. That's a capital crime. The two brothers were again shocked, their necks turning in sync. They looked at Suchan with puzzled faces. Li Miaozhen calmly met his gaze. Neither angry nor flustered, she seemed to completely disregard the laws of the great wind. Suchan suddenly realized that number two was a hot-blooded idealist. Even though he was brave and righteous, it didn't change the fact that he was a rogue hero challenging authority. Most importantly, number two was a fifth-grade expert. To him, everyone present was trash. I need to adjust my attitude, Su thought. I can't apply pressure on him. Judging by the current situation, it's impossible to have Susu work for me. Suchan smiled and said, I'm not the type to push others when I have the upper hand. Everything can be negotiated. I mostly admire General Li's dedication. Over the past year, you've tirelessly fought bandits everywhere. Your patriotism and compassion embarrass me. But I am very fond of Miss Susu. General Li, can you part with her? Li Miaozhen replied, although Susu is a powerful wraith, she cannot exist permanently, unless she continually absorbs vital energy. If this continues, she'll lose her sanity, and become a monster beyond control. Only by staying with me can she maintain her current form. Your sex disciples are not skilled in handling such beings. Keeping her around would only harm others, and yourself. Suchan stood up and asked him to wait. At the same time, he thought, your real-life demeanor is so different from your online image. Why are you so serious? As he was about, he glanced at Zhu Guangxiao and Song Tingfeng, who looked dazed and stiff. He couldn't help but burst. The thoughts of the two hapless brothers were in sync. What is May? What does absorbing vital energy mean? What are they talking about? Shortly after, Suchan returned holding a wine jug. With a bang, he placed it on the table. Li Miaozhen examined the inscriptions on the jug. She recognized it as a Taoist maple forest charm. Suchan opened the jug. Thin smoke wafted up from the jug's mouth. It transformed into a stunning, charming woman. She glared angrily at Suchan and scolded, you stinky man. I'm starving. Then, she noticed Li Miaozhen. Her expression immediately became pitiful. She whined, Master, you must stand up for me. This jerk bullied and insulted me. If you had come any later, I'd be pregnant with his demon child. At that moment, the sound of two hearts breaking was heard. It happened the instant Susu appeared. Both brothers were frozen like ice sculptures.